Art version. Immortal has entered the stage ahead of schedule, with a serene fragrance and fragrance. Apart from the broken dark spotlight, unforgivable original sin, and the thorny crown. When I appear, I also need a BGM that makes the stars tremble, a gentle breeze that fades the white night, and a majestic flower that condenses blood. Popular version. The terminally ill boy becomes silent, obtains his father's mysterious relic, survives and grows all the way, from his sophomore illness to the great demon king, being warmed, melted, and gradually approaching the truth about this world. VIP Group 5649199797, keywords of the novel. The Rebellious Great Demon King with no pop-ups, the complete collection download of The Rebellious Great Demon King TXT, and the latest chapter reading of The Rebellious Great Demon King. Chapter 1. A Not Too Sad Funeral. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. A Not Too Sad Funeral. The weather in Hunan Province in April is gloomy and cold. There are green tender sprouts growing tenaciously in the cracks of the bricks, but the harshness of winter has not yet left, and those greenery seems a bit lonely. A row of ants were carrying food under swaying leaves and climbing hard, their thin bodies as if they were about to be blown away by the wind at any moment. It doesn't matter if it's blown away, there will be new ants added to the team, and life is just a mechanical and arduous cycle. Qingma thought to himself. At this moment, he is kneeling in front of his father's glass coffin in the Jiuxian Hall of Yangmingshan Funeral Home, dressed in mourning clothes, to pay respects to the guests. Behind him hangs a huge black and white portrait of his father Qing Yongzi, which was enlarged and printed on his work permit. Qing Yongzi, who was in his 20s at that time, was in his prime, with a clear and beautiful appearance resembling an idol star. Hanging on both sides are super long couplets personally written by Li Mingde, the mentor of Qing Yongzi. On the economy of literature and culture, they are full of thousands of years. From now on, hanging on the ancient city, climbing the tower at sunset, no one can ride a basket and mourn the Iron Man. Having discussed personal matters with the public, I come to mourn and mourn. I am left to cherish my motherland, enjoy the spring breeze and wine, and even cry for Lin Zong with the hooked party from the couplet. It appears that Li Mingde is not like a teacher, but more like a confidant. Compared to Qing Yongzi's stunning appearance, 16-year-old Qing Imo is not tall and appears somewhat slender, malnourished, with a mediocre appearance that can barely be called delicate. However, he is not at all as handsome as his father and has nothing to do with his mother's beauty. Wearing a pair of black plastic-framed glasses, with messy hair on top of the head, and a youthful face. A face expressionless before waking up. But upon closer inspection, one would notice that his gaze at this moment was somewhat numb, or even cold. His gaze was fixed on the entrance of the funeral hall, as if he had no focus, as if indulging in endless grief. However, if one were to observe carefully, one would notice something different. His bowing angle is always 45 degrees, without any deviation, and his eyes never stop at anyone. He always looks far outside the door, and his deep and dark eyes are full of calmness. A continuous stream of people came to pay their respects, mostly colleagues from the Hunan Provincial Academy of Social Sciences where Qing Mo's father used to work. Last year, Qing Mo's father, Qing Yongzi, was transferred to the Huaxia Academy of Social Sciences as the deputy director of the Anthropology Research Institute. At the age of 44, he became the youngest member of the Academy of Social Sciences at the beginning of this year, equivalent to an academician of the Academy of Sciences, also known as an academician of humanities. Although he was already in the third batch of members, this honor still symbolizes the highest academic level of the Academy of Social Sciences and even the highest academic level in China. After all, Huaxia Academy of Social Sciences is the 9th-ranked think tank in the world and the 1st-ranked think tank in the country. This article is not related to reality, please do not compare it with real rankings. Although Qing Mo's father, Qing Yongzi, wore the guise of a top scholar and genius throughout his life, he was admired by many in the academic community. But in terms of life and family, he is not a qualified husband and father. Cheng Mo was diagnosed with congenital heart disease 3 months after birth. At the age of 6, he was diagnosed with single ventricle, patent ductus arteriosus, large artery ectopia, and pulmonary artery stenosis. Such a complex condition is extremely rare and cannot be treated surgically. The doctor bluntly stated that it is a miracle for such a child to live beyond the age of 20. Speaking of which, Cheng Mo should receive more love from his parents. However, Cheng Yang's devoted himself to academic research and almost ignored Cheng Mo, putting all the pressure on his mother Lin Yiqing. Cheng Mo's mother, Lin Yiqing, is of Chinese descent, both of whom are from the United States. When she came to study in China, she met Cheng Yongzi, who was attracted by his handsome appearance and genius identity. Without a long period of adjustment, she married Cheng Yongzi under strong opposition from her own parents. However, the married life was completely different from what she had imagined. Apart from his academic prowess and good growth, Cheng Yongzi received almost negative scores in other aspects. He was dull and had no interest in anything, and had hardly taken on any family obligations except for giving money. Even when Lin Yiqing argued with him, he didn't argue with her and just listened silently. Everyone believes that Cheng Yongzi is not worth wasting his time and energy on anything other than being interested in academics. As for why he married Lin Yiqing, Cheng Mo speculates that his father may have been deeply influenced by Socrates. It should be noted that for ancient Greeks, an ideal marriage did not require spiritual communication, and each had their own division of labor and mission. One of Socrates' disciples, Xenophon, gave the reason for marriage in the Qi family. Firstly, to reproduce offspring; secondly, it is to provide people with a sense of security for their old age; finally, it is about sharing work. Men are responsible for outdoor work, while women are responsible for indoor work, including keeping food and property, nurturing babies, making bread, sewing clothes, etc. Cheng Mo remembered Socrates once saying to Xenophon, "I advise you to run away as fast as you can when you see a beautiful woman." Xenophon asked in confusion, "Why?" Socrates replied, "This kind of youthful and beautiful animal is much more terrifying than a poisonous spider. A good marriage only brings you happiness, while a bad marriage can make you a philosopher." Cheng Mo felt that his father's marriage was just an experiment, while he himself was a flawed experiment. After giving birth to Cheng Mo, Lin Yiqing persisted for 6 years. In the end, Cheng Mo's illness became the last straw that crushed her. When Cheng Mo was 7 years old, she chose to divorce Cheng Yongzi and give up her custody, returning to the United States. According to the doctor's advice, it was best for Cheng Mo not to go to school, but unfortunately, Cheng Yongzi didn't have the energy to take care of him. He hired a nanny to take care of him at home, and the older nanny kept stealing and taking it. The younger nanny tried to seduce Cheng Yongzi and didn't do much housework. Therefore, at Cheng Mo's strong request, he was sent to school. The fact proved that the doctor's words were not wrong. At the age of 16, Cheng Mo had already brushed past death several times, and the critical illness notice was almost a common occurrence for him. However, Cheng Mo was still lucky because most people with such serious illnesses died young in infancy. But God's favor allowed him to survive tenaciously, and he also carried his backpack like other children, enjoying campus life. However, from a young age, Cheng Mo has been different from other children. Not only can he not exercise vigorously, but he is also prone to catching colds and getting sick. He often needs to go to the hospital for injections. When the condition is severe, his body will suffer from severe hypoxia, and even his whole body may turn blue and purple. Due to his illness and intelligence, he was specially taken care of by the teacher. In addition, he was unable to exercise and his lips turned purple when he was emotionally agitated. This was unique, and he was ridiculed and excluded, so he couldn't make friends. Even though he was a top student from a young age and always ranked first in his class, like his father, he still couldn't change his isolated situation. After entering junior high school, the phenomenon of Cheng Mo cyanosis becomes more severe, and a little more movement can turn lips and nails purple. The ability to move is also weakening, and walking for a long time can cause chest tightness and asthma. At the age of 15, during the middle school entrance examination, the doctor told Cheng Yimo that his heart looked like a gourd, and it was a miracle that he could live to this day. The doctor also called Cheng Yongza and told him frankly that Cheng Yimo may not live to adulthood, 18. He suggested not to let him continue his education and instead take him around to enjoy the last moments of his life. Cheng Yongza ignored the doctor's advice, and Cheng Yimo still took the high school entrance examination and the college entrance examination. He entered Chanya Middle School with the first score in the Star City College entrance examination, and Cheng Yongza was also transferred to Huaxia Academy of Social Sciences that year. Originally, Cheng Yongza was going to take Cheng Yimo to the capital, but after Cheng Yimo passed by, he became seriously uncomfortable and his condition worsened. Therefore, Cheng Yongza could only let Cheng Yimo return to the Star City. Anyway, Cheng Yongza was not worried about Cheng Mo's ability to take care of himself. Apart from giving money, Cheng Yongza has not provided much help to Cheng Yimo in daily life over the years. It is entirely Cheng Yimo who is taking care of himself. Apart from seeing a doctor, taking medicine, and eating, all other household chores, such as paying water, electricity, and gas bills, and hiring someone to clean the house, are taken care of by Cheng Yimo. Therefore, Cheng Yongza is very reassured about Cheng Yimo. On the contrary, Cheng Yimo thinks that his father, who only knows how to research and write papers, is more worrying. However, Cheng Yimo did not expect that he had not yet died. His father, who had almost zero self-care ability, had a car accident and died first. For his father's death, Cheng Ma did not feel much sadness. In Cheng Ma's view, life and death were inherently inevitable, and his father, Cheng Yongza, as an anthropologist, must also be a philosopher. Philosophical research is the process of constantly moving towards such a realm of thought and gradually establishing a conscious awareness of death, which involves constantly rehearsing exercises to prepare for death, that is, to achieve an existence without physical framework limitations. Plato's statement that philosophy is the rehearsal of death means this. Simply put, a person's life is accompanied by death and they are preparing for it. Death is not about losing life, it is just about walking out of time. Cheng Yimo has a profound understanding of this, and he is also indifferent to life and death. Not being indifferent is not enough. People like him, who have been so close to death since birth, can't help but worry themselves to death long ago. Recalling his childhood, he couldn't exercise and the only entertainment he could choose was reading books. However, Cheng Yongza didn't show Cheng Yimo children's books, but directly gave him a set of philosophy books as enlightenment reading materials. When other children were reciting 300 Tang poems, he read Philosophical Enlightenment for Children. He still remembers that the first chapter of this book is called Life and Death. A stone will not die because it has not changed. It doesn't die because it has never lived before. Everything that changes, can grow, and is growing will disappear. There is life, there is death. The difference in life lies in its different values. When a mosquito dies, it dies, when a dog dies, you cry. However, the more people are sad and mournful after a person's death, the greater their value. Cheng Yimo watched as Cece grumbled and wrote 500 or 1,000 human feelings at the table at the door. He thought to himself, with my father's emotional intelligence, how much academic contribution has he made to become the deputy director of the Anthropological Research Institute? Seeing his Aunt Huang Xiaoyun sitting at the table, counting money until her hands twitched, Cheng Yimo felt a bit helpless. Perhaps the next life was not as easy as he thought, because the identity of a minor was not a protection, but a restriction for him. Just as Cheng Ma felt his legs tingling and his body couldn't bear it, his uncle Cheng Jidong walked over to Cheng Ma and said affectionately, "Cheng Ma, it's time for cremation. You can hold the urn and walk at the front later." Cheng Jidong is 4 or 11 years old, with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and straight facial features. He looks a bit similar to Cheng Yongza, but far from being as handsome and elegant as Cheng Yongza. He has a slightly chubby figure and dresses like a simple village official. In fact, Cheng Jidong has opened a small shop a few square meters in the DC area of his hometown willing to make a living. And Cheng Mo's aunt, who looks somewhat handsome and appears virtuous but actually sharp, Huang Qiaoyun, is an accountant in a factory. After Cheng Yongzi passed away, Cheng Jidong and Huang Qiaoyun came to Xingcheng to help manage Cheng Yongzi's funeral. In fact, most of the work was done by Li Fengxian, the union chairman of the Hunan Academy of Social Sciences and a colleague of Cheng Yongzi. Cheng Jidong also did the work of serving tea and water, while Huang Qiaoyun, as a professional accountant, naturally took on the responsibility of collecting favors. Cheng Mo's grandparents passed away early, and his mother Lin Yiqing had long been silent. Guardianship was likely to fall on Cheng Jidong and Huang Qiaoyun. Although he could live independently, he could not legally do so. In fact, he has become accustomed to the silence of his own life and somewhat resists the intervention of his uncles and aunts, but there are some things that he, as a high school student, cannot make decisions about. Cheng Imo didn't even look up at Cheng Jidong, just gave a soft, "oh" sound, got up and rubbed his unconscious leg, because he had been kneeling here for a long time. At this moment, his lips were tinged with a faint purple color, and there were sparkling beads of sweat on the corners of his forehead. This prolonged kneeling is actually a considerable burden on Qingma's body. Despite being fortunate in suffering, Qingma only silently endured and remained silent. Although this filial piety may seem meaningless to Qingma, he is still willing to do his best to complete such a ceremony, which can be considered a form of respect for tradition. Cheng Jidong didn't care about Cheng Mo's hard work, nor did he mind his slightly indifferent attitude. His nephew had always looked like he was dying, and he had already understood and gotten used to it. Cheng Jidong explained to Cheng Imo a few words, and immediately went to greet the leaders who came to bid farewell to Cheng Yongzi, with a flattering expression on his face. After a moment it was unknown who handed the urn to Cheng Mo's hand. Then, his father's body was carried out of the glass coffin, and the farewell drumbeat team was ready to play. Cheng Imo held the urn and looked back at his father, thinking, "We will all die because we are alive. This seems a bit ridiculous." With the words of the funeral MC, the crowd in the auditorium lined up quietly according to their positions, and the unappealing mournful sound played by the cheap band, apart from the noise, showed no signs of sadness. As the only son, Cheng Imo stood at the forefront, and as the queue advanced towards the cremation furnace, everyone remained silent thinking of the farewell procession at other people's homes. The cries were deafening. Qingma felt that he should have responded and sobbed twice, otherwise no one would have shed tears throughout the funeral, which was really heartbreaking. Unfortunately, before Cheng Imo could squeeze out a few tears, the cremation furnace had already arrived. Cheng Imo looked at his father's profile under the cover of the firelight and thought to himself, "This is really a not too sad funeral." Because the preface does not have the function of discussing this chapter, it has been adjusted to the first chapter and the chapter has been postponed accordingly. Please do not mind if the introduction to this chapter does not match the numbering. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Money is the greatest fairness in the world. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Money is the greatest fairness in the world. After the cremation was completed, and Huang Qiaoyun and Cheng Imo sent the ashes box to the funeral home. As Cheng Yongzi died unexpectedly, he naturally did not buy a cemetery in advance. Therefore, for the official burial, he would choose an auspicious day on the Chinese zodiac after purchasing the cemetery and invite some Taoists or monks to do the work. Huang Qiaoyun prattles about the price of cemetery in Qingma's ear, and roast about the high price in the provincial capital. One urn box costs 5 or 6,000 yuan. It is not bought in the funeral home, but it does not provide storage services. He also says that death is like the lights go out. It is okay to eat well and live well before death. After death, there is no need to pursue that luxury mansion-type cemetery. Qingma naturally understood that Huang Qiaoyun's words meant there was no need to buy a too expensive cemetery for Cheng Yongzi. However, Qingma thought to himself that his son's cemetery was much more luxurious than his father's, and it was also too unconventional. Yes, Qingma had his own post-death residence many years ago, and his father Qingyang's brought him to choose it himself. Qingmo pondered whether to give his father his own cemetery. A magnate like Qing Yongzi, who has published several anthropological works, must at least provide a decent place for future generations to remember and rely on. However, he could only be considered intelligent, and his father's genius was naturally hard to match. In addition, he estimated that he would not have many years to live, let alone achieve his father's high achievements at this moment. Qingmo remembered the last book written by Qing Yongzi called The Origins of Humanity. When Qing Yongzi asked his mentor, Li Mingde, the dean of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, to correct it, Li Mingde felt that the title was too broad, and so many academic experts dared not compare to Darwin. Using it as a topic, but Qing Yongzi dared, which was too frivolous. But after reading Qing Yongzi's manuscript, he was transferred from the Hunan Academy of Social Sciences to the Huaxia Academy of Social Sciences and appointed as the deputy director of the Anthropology Research Institute. He was also elected as a member of the faculty of the Academy of Social Sciences at the beginning of this year, indicating that this book should bear its name. Unfortunately, Qingmo never saw this book published, and there was no manuscript of The Origin of Humanity in the remains and artifacts transferred from the Huaxia Academy of Social Sciences. I don't know who owns my father's posthumous work at this time. Qingmo is not worried about his father's academic research, but if the content of the book really matches the title of The Origins of Humanity, the royalties will definitely be astronomical. Qingmo never felt that there was anything wrong with longing for money, pursuing money, and there was nothing shameful about it. For him, money is the game rules of this world, a great and free tool, and money is the greatest fairness in this world. Therefore, it is not unreasonable to say that human social status is directly linked to the money they can control. Qingmo was completely not listening to his aunt Huang Qiaoyun's words. He just felt a little annoyed when he thought that his uncle Qing Jidong would naturally become his guardian, especially when he thought of his cousin. Qingmo nodded loudly. That's right, his cousin's name is Qing Xiuyan, which is also a masterpiece of his father Qing Yongzi. However, Qingmo's name is quite appropriate. Qing Xiuyan is completely different from Xiuyan, in that she is weak and sickly, and does not like to speak. Qingmo's cousin, Qing Xiuyan, who works as a police officer, is simply an ADHD patient. She enjoys exercise, is energetic, and speaks frequently and quickly. These are exactly what Qingma dislikes, and her strengths include being beautiful, enthusiastic and kind, and having a strong sense of justice, which happens to be exactly what Qingma dislikes. In addition, there is also a younger cousin named Qing Haoyang, a self-righteous little brat. Qingmo really doesn't have a good impression of his uncle's family. If it weren't for his close relationship, Qing Jidong would always talk about it at gatherings. He gave up his argument of going to college because his father was able to attend, and Qingmo really wanted to distance himself from this family. Qingma doesn't look down on typical urban-minded uncles and aunts, he just doesn't like to deal with such people. Dealing with such people is too troublesome, and Qingma is naturally afraid of trouble. Strangely enough, Qing Jidong and Huang Qiaoyun's genes are far inferior to those of Qing Yongzi and Lin Yiqing. However, their daughter and son are born with high looks, while Qingmo, who should be handsome, looks very ordinary and can only marvel at the magic of creation. Qingmo and Huang Qiaoyun watched as the staff climbed the stairs to place their father's ashes at a high place. The bottom of the shelf was already full and could only be placed at a high place. After getting down, the staff wrote a storage card according to the storage location and handed it to him. For the custody of such worthless things, Huang Qiaoyun naturally wouldn't argue with Qingmo. He tightly grasped the shoulder bag containing a large amount of gift money and said to Qingmo, "Let's go. Xiao, there is still one more meal to treat at noon, which is a huge expense. I told your uncle that there is no need to treat more than 500 tables of food and leave some money for your medical treatment. Your uncle refused to do it and felt that it should not be too embarrassing. He lost his face. According to me, your father has already passed away. Why do you still want this empty face? The important thing is to save some money for your livelihood, which is the hard truth. In fact, the food at over 500 tables is already very cheap. Although the Hunan Academy of Social Sciences does not have much real power and is a noble unit, the capable people among them are think tanks who can give advice to decision-makers in Hunan province. The government funding is also not small, not to mention peripheral units. The people who come to attend Cheng Yong's funeral are almost all high-end intellectuals in Hunan province, including well-known scholars. Moreover, Cheng Yong's salary is not low, and with the publication of some books, his income is quite substantial. It is a bit stingy for the cashier to treat the guests attending the ceremony at the cafeteria in Yangmingshan, and the gift money given by the guests is not small. Cheng Ma is too lazy to argue about these things, but it doesn't mean he doesn't understand, and he doesn't care at all about face or anything, but he cares about the money. The more we look at philosophy and history, the less we believe in human nature. We silently understand that conscience is insignificant in the face of interests. Although he still couldn't understand Huang Qiaoyun's true thoughts, he never hesitated to speculate on others with the greatest malice, because only in this way could he gain the least disappointment. Therefore, he pretended to be harmless to humans and animals and said, "It's really fortunate that uncle and aunt have suffered so much." Huang Qiaoyun said, "What's the hardship? This is what your uncle and I should do. Look at your father leaving, you're the only one left in your family. Your cruel mother, there's been no news for almost 10 years, really." Thinking of how saying these things at this moment seemed to sprinkle salt on Cheng Mo's wound, Huang Qiaoyun chuckled and immediately comforted, "Don't worry, Xiao Mo uncle and aunt will take care of you in the future. You said you only have us relatives now. Who can you rely on instead of us?" Cheng Mo didn't listen to what his nagging aunt said at all. He had always automatically blocked out words with little nutritional value. If he had to listen to any garbage, his deformed little heart would probably have exploded long ago. He filtered out his aunt's incessant chatter and walked towards the funeral home cafeteria as noon approached. The spacious hall of the antique-decorated Yangmingshan funeral parlor cafeteria was filled with people, looking quite lively. Although it was definitely not a sumptuous lunch, many leaders and renowned scholars from the Hunan Provincial Academy of Social Sciences did not leave, and other visitors naturally had to patiently wait for this meal before leaving. Cheng Jidong and Li Fengxian, the uncles of Cheng Mo, arranged for some distinguished guests to take their seats, mainly for high-ranking leaders and scholars to arrange their seats on the table, so as to avoid any embarrassing or unpleasant situations caused by sitting in the wrong position without noticing the height of their eyebrows and eyes. As for the others, they are mostly sitting together as acquaintances, and there is no need to deliberately arrange seats. At this point, there were already 16 or 7 tables densely packed in the hall. As most of them were people from the same circle, there were no obstacles to conversation. However, after all, they were all cultured people who spoke softly and elegantly, so they did not appear particularly noisy. While Cheng Mo is like a supporting role who nobody pays attention to. He sits in a remote corner near the window to review his lessons. The final exam is coming in 2 days. He must seize the time to sort out his knowledge points. He doesn't care about the first place he has never lost, let alone his own achievements, but he doesn't like making mistakes, especially simple things like exams. With just over 20 minutes left from the seat, Cheng Ma immediately immersed himself in the sea of questions. For Cheng Ma, his body cannot move, but his brain can. The brain activities that stimulate thinking, such as doing problems and studying, make him feel a kind of pleasure similar to running, with a fever and sweat all over his body, and no distractions in his mind, surpassing the obstacles of time and space. Simply put, learning makes me happy. Cheng Mo quickly solved the problem with his phone and quickly immersed himself. Even his uncle Cheng Jidong searched for him everywhere without paying attention. It wasn't until Cheng Jidong came over and patted his shoulder that Cheng Mo woke up from the sea of questions and looked up at him. Cheng Jidong's face was still adorned with some sweat, and his expression was a bit nervous. He said with a tone of blame, "Xiao Mo, what kind of phone are you still playing with at this time?" Come over quickly, your father's mentor Li Mingde, Dr. Li's son Li Jiting, Dr. Li wants to say a few words to you. As a small shop owner, Qing Jidong is naturally a bit anxious and fearful as it is his first time encountering such a high-end person. Qing Yimo is not familiar with his father's social circle, but he also knows that Li Mingde, a tycoon who has entered the decision-making level in China, has never met his father's mentor, let alone Li Jiting. Although Li Jiting has a high status, he can still be considered as Qing Yongzhe's senior brother. It is not surprising to ask Qing Yimo for a few words to show his concern. Qing Yimo exclaimed, "Oh," stood up from the chair, stuffed his phone into his pocket, and followed Qing Jidong towards the front table. At this moment, food was being served, and the table had already been served with 4 cools and 4 heats as appetizers. Uniformed waiters shuttle through it, and people at the table are holding appetizing snacks and chatting while eating. Qing Yimo followed Qing Jidong to the table closest to the gate in the first row. This table had the smallest number of people, only 9 of whom were sitting. Moreover, the people at this table seemed to be older, with a strong sense of authority in high positions. Except for the middle-aged person sitting in the main seat, they were slightly younger. Qing Yimo had never seen a single one, only knowing that the kind-hearted old man sitting on the right side of the main seat with gray hair was Wang Shanhai, the director of the Hunan Academy of Social Sciences. The reason why I know Wang Shanhai is because I have read his book, A Brief History of Chinese Philosophy. Of course, there was another person he didn't know, but he knew who he was, and that was Li Jiting, who sat prominently in the main seat and was the youngest in the table. Li Jiting was wearing an iron black suit. Unlike other scholars with regular hairstyles and glasses present, he had a long, mid-length hair that exuded an artistic aura. His eyes were small, as if he was squinting, and the corners of his mouth were always curved, as if he was smiling. As soon as Qing Yimo approached, Li Jiting looked up and down at Qing Yimo, who was thin and weak like a bean sprout vegetable and only a little over 1.7 meters tall. He placed his chopsticks on the chopstick rack and asked, "Are you Yongzhe's son?" At this moment, a group of academic experts in the field of Chinese humanities are all focusing their attention on the somewhat frail figure of Qing Mo. Qing Yimo didn't speak, just nodded, looking like he was a bit scared. Li Jiting smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. What's your name? What grade are you in?" Although Qing Mo wanted to ignore such a childish question of treating him like a 3-year-old child, he could only reluctantly and honestly answer, "Qing Mo, study in the first year of high school." Upon hearing Qing Mo's words carry a strange calmness, not as timid as they appear on the surface, Li Jiting asked with great interest, Qing Yimo's silence. "How did your father give you such a name?" End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Thinker Racing Fate. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The Thinker Racing Fate, the deepest spirit must also be the most frivolous, which is almost the formula of my philosophy. Nietzsche. This kind of question and tone actually lacked etiquette, so Qing Mo gave Li Jiting a faint glance, then looked at the glass cup on his table, and said calmly, "The water in the cup is crystal clear, and the water in the sea is dim and profound. The small truths can be explained clearly in words, but the big truths only have great silence. As the saying goes, without desire, one becomes strong." Qing Motsai doesn't care who the table is or how big the background is. He directly uses Tagore's poetry to mock Li Jiting for not understanding the big truth. Upon hearing Qing Mo's answer, Li Jiting couldn't help but laugh. He didn't take Qing Mo's mockery seriously and asked, "Is this the purpose of your father naming you Qing Mo?" He knew that Cheng Yang's had no love for poetry and songs, and he decided not to know Tagore's so obscure lines. Qing Yimo answered softly, "I guess so, because he really appreciates Wittgenstein. The reason for being quiet is that he has always been unable to do anything with great force and must save as much energy as possible." Upon hearing Qing Mo's answer, everyone present smiled and nodded, except for Qing Mo's uncle, Qing Jidong, who was completely confused. Ordinary people naturally do not know who Wittgenstein is, let alone Wittgenstein's belief that silence and awe should be maintained when the object is grand enough to be indescribable. For example, a brief philosophical theory, such as the ideal of life, which is a virtual thing. Some philosophical theories, although only a few words long, cannot be explained clearly in thousands of words because human expression ability is limited. Some ideals may be distant and unattainable, but those who pursue the impossible should not be ridiculed. So sometimes silence is a noble attitude. Li Jiding chuckled and said, "You're a bit interesting." Using Tagore's poetry to express Wittgenstein's philosophy, I thought you and your father were the same old school, but I didn't expect you to be much more interesting than your father. I like it. Laughing so happily at someone else's funeral banquet is actually a bit disrespectful, but not to mention the high status of everyone present, they are all experts from the Academy of Social Sciences. They are far more open-minded about life and death than ordinary people, and they are not bound by ordinary secular rules. Therefore, they all looked at Qinghua with a smile, and in Qinhua's eyes, there was a sense of relief that the tiger father had no son. Li Jiding said again, "I believe your grades are very good. You are in the first year of high school this year, and there are still 2 years left before the college entrance examination. Have you ever thought about following your father's footsteps to study at Tsinghua University?" Cheng Yimou recalled his painful experience of not adapting to the local conditions in the capital and said without hesitation, "I won't go to Tsinghua." Li Jiding was somewhat surprised and said, Why? So, what university are you planning to attend?" Cheng Yimou did not explain that he could not go to Beijing due to physical reasons, but simply said, "I will take the university entrance exam in Xinjiang." Although he does not want to be confined to a single city, there is undoubtedly everything he is familiar with here, as well as doctors who are familiar with him, which can greatly increase his chances of survival. Li Jiding naturally believed that Cheng Yimou may not be very confident in his grades, because generally speaking, local universities lower the score line for local students. Therefore, he said, "Even if you take the Tsinghua exam, it's okay if your grades are slightly worse. I'll find a way for you." Sitting next to Li Jiding, Wang Shanhai couldn't help but interject, "Tsinghua is good, but our universities in Xinjiang are also good. The School of Philosophy at Yuelu Academy is a prestigious department with a long history." Li Jiding smiled and said, "Dean Wang, I didn't say that Yuelu Academy is bad. I just hope that Cheng Yimou can walk along his father's path and take a look. You know, Yongzhe was a prominent figure in our Tsinghua University back then. Now, our Tsinghua alumni network is using Cheng Yongzhe's photos as the cover. Back then, no math girls saw him as their ideal object, and the love letters they received were piled up like mountains. Besides, my father was Yongzhe's mentor, so being Cheng Mo's mentor can be considered a beautiful story." Upon hearing Li Jiding's words, everyone finally understood what had happened to the funeral of Cheng Yongzhe, who had come specifically to attend. They also lamented that Cheng Yimou would be able to enjoy the shadow of his father, and that it would be natural for him to step forward smoothly in the future. But everyone present doesn't quite understand why the Li family still promised such a great favor after Cheng Yongzhe's death. After all, Cheng Yongzhe is just a dead genius, with no foundation in China, let alone children of aristocratic families. Cheng Yimou still didn't explain that he couldn't go to Beijing or Tsinghua University due to physical reasons. He just bowed slightly and said, "Thank you then." He wanted to keep this opportunity, and he also knew what Li Jiding's promise meant. Although he didn't need it, it's unlikely that he won't be able to use this favor in the future. Li Jiding smiled and said, "Don't say thank you yet. You still have to answer me a question." Li Jiding paused for a moment and asked, "Why do you like philosophy?" This is a question without a standard answer. Everyone has their own answer in their heart, and for the answer to this question, everyone has their own evaluation criteria. Famous officials from Hunan province and even across the country are eagerly watching with interest as the youngest member of the Chinese Ministry of Education, Cheng Yongzhe's son, answers this question. Cheng Imo remained silent for a moment in front of everyone, shook his head, and said, "Actually, I don't really like philosophy. I just don't want to disappear without thinking about anything when I die." As soon as this sentence was spoken, it immediately put an end to the slightly relaxed and cheerful atmosphere. Although Cheng Mo's words were deafening, a child discussing life and death in front of a group of elderly people was somewhat unconventional, as if expressing sorrow for a new poem. Everyone felt that Cheng Mo's answer was a bit of a deduction, but of course, they didn't know that the child in front of them had a terminal illness and lived in the present day without knowing if there was a tomorrow. Cheng Jidong didn't understand what Cheng Imo had said earlier, but the meaning of what he said was still clear enough. Seeing the atmosphere freeze, Cheng Jidong quickly opened his mouth with a bitter smile and explained, "My nephew should have been a genius like his father, but fate has been with him since childhood. The doctor said his physical condition won't last for 20 years. A group of scholars naturally wouldn't laugh at Cheng Jidong for not being proficient in writing in ink, nor did they specifically point out his mistakes. They just looked at each other and sighed in their hearts as they looked at Cheng Imo, whose face was clear and seemingly unmoved. They didn't know what to say, and in that moment, Cheng Mo's image became deep like a thinker. Li Jiding was also stunned for a moment. He didn't speak for a long time. After looking at Cheng Mo for a long time with a gloomy and uncertain expression, he reached out and patted his shoulder, saying, "Only the tip of the nose of death can make us feel the urgency of life. However, seeing your calm appearance makes me very pleased. I think your father's spirit in heaven will bless you." Cheng Imo was naturally indifferent to such comfort and said, "Actually, I'm quite afraid of death. I just know that fear is useless, so I'm too lazy to be afraid. As for my dad, I hope he can still order takeout in heaven." At this moment, Cheng Mo can still roast, which makes Li Jiding laugh uncontrollably. After laughing, he patted Cheng Mo on the shoulder again and said, "I really like you, Cheng Mo. You are much more interesting than your father's boring person. I'm curious. What would you do if you didn't have this disease?" Cheng Imo replied almost without much thought, "If I didn't have this disease, I think I should be a spendthrift, arrogant, lazy, and just living a mediocre life." Li Jiding shrugged his shoulders and said, "This is really a surprising answer. Come, give me your phone number." After saying that, Li Jiding took out his phone. Cheng Imo read out his phone number, Li Jiding saved it and dialed it, then said to Cheng Imo, "I said I'm serious about helping you go to Peking University. You must call me during your exam." Cheng Mo thanks again. Li Jiding smiled and said, "Let's go eat." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Mysterious Relics. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Mysterious Relics. After the banquet, Cheng Jidong and Huang Qiaoyun were busy packing up their things, putting away the unfinished wine and drinks that could be taken to the wholesale department for sale. Cheng Imo sat on the side, holding his phone to practice questions, waiting for his uncle and aunt to finish packing up and go home. Suddenly, a message popped up on his phone. At first, he thought it was spam because there were not many people's phone numbers on his phone, and he had no friends or needed friends. But what appeared was Li Jiding's name. Clicking on it, the text message was asking him to come to the parking lot of the funeral home now. Cheng Imo was a bit strange. Li Jiding was one of the first people to leave, but he didn't expect to be still in Yangmingshan. He couldn't think of anything worth waiting for such a big shot in the parking lot. Cheng Imo was puzzled and spoke to his uncle Cheng Jidong before getting up and leaving the hall, walking towards the outside of the cafeteria. The weather on this day was particularly gloomy and cold, with a low canopy and strong winds outside that made it difficult to breathe. Cheng Mo's thin and weak body walked in the cold wind as if it was about to be blown away at any time. Cheng Imo walked slowly and calmly to the somewhat empty parking lot, looking around for a target. Inside the pile of cars, a black Audi A8 honked and flashed its headlights. The light in this slightly gray world is like a lighthouse guiding the direction. Cheng Imo walked straight towards the Audi A8, but did not accelerate his pace. He still approached the Audi slowly at a constant pace. At this moment, he could see clearly that Li Jiting was sitting in the back seat, smoking through the open window. The rustling wind had disheveled his long hair, and the cigarette ash evaporated in the air, instantly being rolled up without a trace. Seeing Qingma walking over, Li Jiting smiled and waved at him from a distance. Qingma walked to the window in the back seat. Li Jiting first casually extinguished the cigarette in the ashtray, then turned to Qingma and said directly, "I called you over because I have something to give you." Speaking, Li Jiting took out a white silk bag tied with a red string from the inner pocket of his suit. The bag was printed with a red six-pointed star logo. Li Jiting weighed the bag in his hand and then reached out from the window to hand it to Qingmo, saying, "I forgot to give it to you earlier. This is your father's relic, you must take good care of it." Qingmo was somewhat puzzled because all the items left by his father in the capital had already been handed over to him and his uncle when he handed over the body. However, Li Jiting had actually handed over some more to him now. Although it was only a small amount, it was also a bit strange. Qingmo took the silk bag that Li Jiting gave him, which looked like a jewelry bag, pinched the bag a bit, and said, "Thank you. Could you please come and visit it yourself?" Li Jiting smiled and said, "Of course, your father and I are friends." Qingmo said, "That's nothing, I'll leave first." Li Jiting nodded and said, "I'll wait for you to get to the capital. Let's meet in the capital and live a good life. Don't let your father down." Qingmo said, "I can only do my best with this." Li Jiting smiled and said, "Just do your best." After saying that, Li Jiting waved his hand at Qingma and said, "Goodbye Qingma." Audi slowly drove forward, and Li Jiting's head protruded from the window, as if trying to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything, just waved his hand again. After Li Jiting sat down, he pressed the window up, and the silent shadows in the rearview mirror gradually decreased until they disappeared. The burly man with a Chinese character face, dressed in formal attire and driving in the driver's seat, suddenly spoke in a low voice, "This doesn't look like your style. Why do you get so sentimental?" Li Jiting said, "I know some of Yongzhe's careful thoughts, so I feel regretful and sad." The man with a Chinese face fell silent when he heard Qing Yongzhe's name and said, "You give him this now, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse." Li Jiting smiled and said, "For this kid, of course it's a blessing. Anyway, there won't be any worse ending. Why don't you explain how to use it to him? If he can't even solve this difficult problem, he can never become a chosen one. Why not waste Yongzhe's hard-won Eulopoulos, Note 1. As the Audi A8 walked away, Qingmo opened the silk bag and lowered his head to look inside. He saw a key, 2 badges, and a white watch shining with a dim luster. He recognized the key as the one that opened the door to his father's dormitory at the Academy of Social Sciences, which he had often seen before. As for the 2 badges, one round one is obviously a badge representing father's identity. The back of the badge is engraved with the number 111, which is the number. Qing Yongzhe happens to be the 111th academic expert in China. Undoubtedly, this badge is the highest honor his father has ever received, while the other badge is thought-provoking. The upper part of this badge is a small flag slightly larger than the 2 nail covers. The flag is fixed with gold metal bars above and below, with triangular patterns on the metal bars. In the middle of the flag is a black equilateral triangle, with a white border depicting the open eyes. The pupils are composed of stars and the moon. The metal strip under the flag is linked to a golden emblem, which is composed of blue wavy enamel surrounded by golden olive leaves. The upper part is carved with a golden compass, and the lower part is a golden ruler. The diamond-shaped space between the compass and the ruler is inlaid with the golden letter G. Qingma picked up this badge and took a look at it. With such obvious markings as the compass, ruler, and panoramic eye, Qingma immediately recognized it as the badge of the evil society, Freemasons, that manipulates the world behind the scenes in many street reading materials. Originally, this Free Stonemason Union was unknown, but after the success of the two books, Currency War, and Ruling the World, the shadow government of the Freemasons, the most powerful financial organization on earth, emerged like a giant beast hidden under the sea in the mist of truth and falsehood. Various rumors can be seen everywhere. Some say it's just a charity organization. Some say it's a coalition of human elites trying to establish a new world order through this organization. Some say the goal of the Freemasons is to eliminate the world's humanity to only 500 million, and some say it's just a wealthy association composed of a group of financial oligarchs. In summary, there are numerous rumors, and the truth is only in the hands of a few people. Originally, these things had nothing to do with Cheng Imo. However, at this moment, in the relic left by Li Jiding to his father, a Freemason emblem suddenly appeared, calling Cheng Imo confused. He never knew that his father could still be a member of the Freemason. However, even if Cheng Yongzi is a member of the Freemasons, it is not surprising. It is normal for geniuses like Cheng Yongzi to be invited to join the Freemasons. Cheng Imo put the badge back into the bag and picked up the last relic. This watch had never been worn by his father before, and Cheng Yongzi seemed to have no habit of wearing a watch. Cheng Imo suspects that Li Jiding may have made a mistake. But he also felt that it was impossible. A person like Li Jiding was waiting for him, and even if it wasn't his father's legacy, the things he gave him were definitely intentionally given to him. Cheng Imo stuffed a silk bag containing badges and keys into his shirt pocket and carefully examined it with his watch. This watch has come to a stop. The white gemstone dial looks like a pale computer screen, without any brand logo on it. The silver pointer floats on the dial without moving, and Chenhua turns over to look at the back. This watch is completely integrated, not even a screw can be seen. A silver dragon carrying its own tail is engraved on the circular chassis behind it. Cheng Imo put the watch into his wrist, ready to try it on. Unexpectedly, he hadn't buckled it yet. The white watch seemed to come alive, like a wriggling white snake, tightening the white strap one by one and tightly gripping his wrist. Cheng Imo was taken aback and was about to reach out and pull off the strange watch when he felt a pain in his wrist, as if an electric current was hitting his brain. Then he felt a blank space in his mind and fainted, and as Chenhua fainted to the ground, the white dial began to slide rows of colorful gene chains, while the mouth of the silver dragon on the back turned crimson as if infused with blood. Underscore 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 underscore. Note 1, Yolopoulos. Chinese name, tailed snake, is a symbol that has been passed down from ancient times to the present day, roughly resembling a snake, or dragon, swallowing its own tail, resulting in a circular ring, sometimes also displayed in a twisted pattern, the shape of the Arabic numeral 8, and its name means self-devourer. This symbol has always had many different symbolic meanings, among which the most widely accepted are meanings such as infinity and cycle. In addition, the tailed snake is also a common symbol in religion and mythology, and an important emblem in alchemy. In modern times, some psychologists, such as Carl Jung, believe that the Hydra actually reflects the prototype of human psychology. The snake god represents the wise and symbolizes the concept of life as a symbol of the Ouroboros, also known as the tail-biting snake. In Norse mythology, the child of Loki is a giant snake with a head and tail intertwined, hermaphroditic body that coils around the entire world, translated as Yolopoulos in Chinese. In a sense, Ouroboros means a vicious cycle. Contemporary thought is no longer moving towards a predetermined truth or goal, so perhaps this snake or dragon can be a symbol of some philosophy. It not only has philosophical significance, but in many ancient myths, there is a snake or dragon that devours itself and survives. In fact, it metaphorically refers to a person who, from the day of birth, continuously devours the past self, reincarnates after death, and starts a new life from a baby. The snake that bites its own tail and connects its head and tail is a symbol of the cycle of life. This symbol was first discovered in ancient Egypt over 3,000 years ago and has been found in many ancient civilizations. Similar snake rings have appeared in over 40 ancient civilizations. In different civilizations, there are different symbols. Usually, the shape of a snake is also represented as a double ring, also known as the infinity shape, which serves as a symbol of the sun and represents its trajectory, symbolizing eternity and infinity. In psychology, it also metaphorically refers to the chaos before the formation of the self, symbolizing the mother, who governs everything. The snake ring Ouroboros, which has numerous meanings, shares the common meaning of reincarnation. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Day of Falling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Day of Falling. Half a month later, Chania Grand Hall. At this moment, it is the scene of the mid-term conference of Chania High School. The auditorium of Noa University is filled with people's heads, and students wearing Chania school uniforms stand on the light brown wooden floor, watching the Mediterranean short and chubby figure standing on stage. Principal Wu Lei praises the students who achieved excellent results in this mid-term exam. In addition to the certificates, these students will also receive scholarships. However, Chania's scholarships are different from cash. Chania's scholarships are electronic vouchers limited to distribution on the Chania app and can only be used internally at Chania High School, such as cafeterias, small shops, swimming pools. Chania's scholarship is not only available for mid-term and final exams, but also for monthly exams. It can even be redeemed for scholarship electronic vouchers by practicing more on the Chania app. Last year, there was an animated film called Welcome to the Classroom of Strength Maximism, which was very popular. Therefore, Chania's scholarship was jokingly called Learning Point by Chania's students who like anime. Later, the saying spread without knowing how. In fact, it was not a thing at all. The broadcast echoed in the auditorium, about to reach the pinnacle of public attention. Next, we will announce the exam results of the most popular second year of high school. The reason why the second year of high school is the most popular is because now it is announced that the top 3 students in grade 2 are Huang Rui, grade 1, grade 2, Hu Yorong, grade 1, and Xie Minyun. Please applaud and encourage everyone. As each name was pronounced, there was a lot of applause, and as Principal Wu Lei loudly pronounced out the first name, the entire school auditorium was filled with thunderous applause. Amidst the huge applause, there were even shouts of Xie Minyun and Xiaoxiang Goddess, creating a somewhat sensational atmosphere with thousands of people. As the top 3 students in their second year of high school stepped onto the stage and Chania school flower Xie Minyun received the certificate from Wu Lei, the atmosphere in the entire auditorium reached a climax in an instant. The warm applause and noisy atmosphere were about to overturn the golden dome of the auditorium under the spotlight. Xie Minyun has long straight hair with clear soup hanging noodles, beautiful eyebrows and eyes under her bangs, a retro artistic style, a height of 1.72 meters, and a curvaceous figure, making her a natural hanger. Her elegant blue slim-fit open front suit paired with a white shirt and a red bow tie gives her an extraordinary temperament, coupled with her slender legs wearing knee-length short socks under the pleated skirt, let the young and passionate boys cry and howl in an instant. She looks more like an idol than most idol stars, so no wonder the recruitment brochure of Chania uses Xie Minyun as a model. After awarding the certificate, Wu Lei, who was shorter than Xie Minyun, smiled and handed the microphone to Xie Minyun, gesturing for her to give a speech. Xie Minyun immediately began a brief speech with ease, starting with Xuanzi's, encouraging learning. When she spoke in a cold and silent tone, she said, "The gentleman said, learning cannot be done. Green is taken from blue, and green is above blue, ice is taken from water, and cold is above water." The entire auditorium suddenly turned into a frenzied large-scale pyramid scheme scene, as if there was a member on stage who spoke up about how much money they had earned, while the audience was looking forward to one day standing side by side with Xie Mingyun as a pyramid scheme trainee. As for why it is not said to be a concert venue, it is because the education model of Changya Middle School seems to be a brainwashing style of passionate education, which is not much different from pyramid schemes. Xie Mingyun's clear voice echoed in the auditorium, and sunlight poured down from the huge lattice windows around the auditorium. The lighting and natural light intertwined, creating a magnificent halo around Xie Mingyun. Suddenly, countless people felt a milky way pouring down Xie Mingyun's head, making her shine brightly. Everyone was whispering and discussing Xie Mingyun, and the words of praise flowed through everyone's mouths. Undoubtedly, she is Xie Mingyun's senior sister. This time, she is number one again. Every time she takes a big exam, she is always number one in the whole grade. It is estimated that she can be recommended to Tsinghua University and Peking University. Being beautiful, having a good family background, and good grades is really enviable. I don't know how perfect a person needs to be to match a girl like Miss Mingyun. I think there are only people like the president of the student union, Senior Duleng, right? After Xie Mingyun finished her speech, enthusiastic applause once again reached a peak, and students shouted loudly, "Xie Mingyun, you are the best. I will always like you JPG." The shout of the second-year middle school boy triggered a burst of laughter. Wu Lei took the microphone from Xie Mingyun's hand, pointed to the open space on the other side of Xie Mingyun, and smiled, "If you have the ability, just stand here and say, what kind of hero is just shouting low?" The entire auditorium immediately reached a climax of commotion, but the boy who had just shouted out involuntarily stood in the crowd and dared not move, like a frightened quail. It wasn't until Wu Lei asked everyone to be quiet and began announcing the top 3 students in their first year of high school that the entire auditorium gradually quieted down. Under the spotlight, short and chubby Wu Lei wiped his sweat with a handkerchief, and then announced from the 3rd place according to tradition, 3rd place, Li Zihao from class 1 and 2 of high school. This student needs to give special praise. In the final exam of last school year, he was still ranked in the 70s. In the mid-term exam of this school year, he jumped to the 3rd place and was promoted to class 1. Please give him applause and encouragement. Applause rang out, and the first-year high school students looked towards class 2 in the second square on the right side of the auditorium, wanting to see which student the suddenly rising ranking was. Li Zihao, on the other hand, walked out of the queue of class 2 of grade 1, with a proud smile on his face. After a moment of applause, Wu Lei looked at the list in his hand and continued to read, 2nd place, Qian Xiaojia from class 1 of high school. Upon hearing this name, all the first-year high school students, especially those in the first class, were very surprised. Even the 2nd place Qian Xiaojia standing in front was a bit confused when he heard his name. When he just announced the 3rd place, he was still a bit disappointed because he knew that with his grades, he would definitely not be able to pass Shenmengjie, and that person not only him, everyone thought that no one in the first year of high school could defeat Shenmengjie and that person in the exam. Especially that person, who can be called an exam machine. As Qian Xiaojia walked out of the class to the applause, she thought that Shenmengjie seemed to have caught a cold during this midterm exam. Qian Xiaojia couldn't help but feel sorry for her. It seemed that her grand promise of winning this exam not only fell through, but also that she didn't even make it to the top 3. Not only Qian Xiaojia thought so, but everyone thought it was Shenmengjie who failed the exam. Qian Xiaojia turned around and glanced at the person with black-framed glasses, thin and weak like a bean sprout vegetable. He was so inconspicuous in the crowd, as if he was about to be drowned at any moment. Qian Xiaojia thought to herself. This time, the 1st place is again with him. At this moment, not only Qian Xiaojia was looking back at Cheng Yimou, but almost everyone's attention was focused on him. The people in school basically knew that this exam, no matter how difficult it was always a monster with full marks. However, Cheng Yimou did not belong to the mainstream physique, and even if his grades were against the sky, he was not a key figure. But under the watchful eyes of everyone, Cheng Mo remained calm and composed. Shen Mingjie, who stood a little ahead of Cheng Mo, had a rather ugly face and a slight tremble in her body. The discussion among everyone made her heart ache. This time, not only did she lose the exam, but she also lost some of the learning points she had accumulated through the exam. What's even more unacceptable to her is that she didn't even make it to the top 3, which was a devastating blow to Shen Mingjie. Under the spotlight, Wu Lei looked at the names on the list and paused for a moment. After looking around at the students below, he said, "First place in grade 1, class 1. Shen Mingjie." Wu Lei's loud announcement, like a thunderbolt, immediately stunned countless people in the auditorium. The entire auditorium exploded in an instant, and no one expected that the person who failed this time was actually Cheng Mo, who was known as the exam machine. Those who bet heavily on Cheng Mo's success with their learning points probably lost this time by taking off their pants, and a very small number of people who bet that Shen Mingjie will win are cheering and celebrating. Standing in front of Cheng Mo on the left, Shen Mingjie was initially somewhat incredulous. Her originally pale face turned red and white, but it wasn't until her best friend grabbed her arm and shook it that Shen Mingjie woke up. At this point, she had already completed the transition from a loser to a winner in her mind, and a vain smile had formed on her delicate and beautiful face. For Shen Mingjie, who has consistently ranked first in grade exams for 3 years in junior high school, this exam only reflected her normal level. Shen Mingjie turned around and glanced at Cheng Mo with a proud expression, saying, "I didn't expect you to not even make it into the top 3 this time. It's really disappointing." Cheng Mo had long known about this result, but he just looked coldly at Shen Mingjie, who was somewhat complacent, as if he was looking at a mentally disabled person. "I thought I would receive false congratulations or unwilling harsh words from Cheng Mo, but the other party turned a blind eye to her." This left Shen Mingjie with nowhere to release her prepared words. At this moment, Shen Mingjie felt as uncomfortable as eating a fly, and despised Cheng Mo's lack of gentlemanly demeanor. She snorted coldly and walked towards the stage amidst applause. Winning Cheng Mo in the mid-term exam this time made her feel extremely confident, and the sensation of attracting attention made her feel particularly happy. Just as Shen Mingjie confidently stepped up the stairs, she saw Xie Mingyun shining brightly on the stage. Her comfort was immediately diminished, and her original goal of surpassing Cheng Mo had become a cloud of smoke from yesterday. Shen Mingjie thought to herself, "Sooner or later, I will also become someone like you." After Wu Lei presented the certificate, she did not give the first place in the first year of high school a chance to speak, which made Shen Mingjie particularly disappointed. She had originally planned to criticize those who did not see her before the exam, but now it seems that there is no chance left. This regret did not affect Shen Mingjie's good mood, but Wu Lei's subsequent words once again dropped a heavy bomb in the auditorium, causing Shen Mingjie to fall into an inexplicable chaos. Wu Lei supported the podium with both hands and said solemnly, "Before the end of this midterm conference, I have to specifically criticize someone. 1. Class is Cheng Mo. In this midterm exam, he handed in all 9 subjects with blank papers. This is a disrespect to the school and the exam. No matter how good his previous grades are or for any reason, he cannot be forgiven. Therefore, the school has made a decision to temporarily freeze Cheng Mo's accumulated scholarship until he makes a self-reflection and reflects on his mistakes." The eyes of all the teachers and students in the school once again focused on the thin and weak voice and shadow in the crowd amidst the uproar. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The Red Queen Hypothesis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. The Red Queen Hypothesis. Silence is a philosophy of life, and when used well, it is also an art. Silence, the sunshine of May, brings a brand new visual experience to the world, and everything starts to brighten up, especially in the afternoon. The entire campus seems transparent. The camphor trees next to the playground exude a fresh green color after rain, while the pure white clouds nurture a subtle dampness. The sky approaches with a blue hue toward summer, and the blooming plants begin an unknown jointing process. We used to think that campus life was just boring learning, but in reality, what it gives you is the unknown immersion at this moment. For the theoretical high school sophomore male protagonist with a strong sense of crisis at this time, he still cannot feel the sweetness of campus life. For him, school is a testing ground for the Red Queen hypothesis, Note 1, where it is not natural selection, but human selection. Everyone is choosing the path of life, striving for better resources in competition. For everyone, not advancing is regression, stagnation is destruction. The slender Qingma walked out of the school auditorium alone with the flow of people, scoring 0 in all 9 subjects, ranking last in the entire grade without controversy, setting a new historical low for Chanya High School. This undoubtedly completed a feat that no one can surpass. The bustling crowd crowded in front of the bulletin boards on both sides of the auditorium to check their rankings in this midterm exam. The scene was comparable to the ancient imperial examination screening scene, magnificent. Those who did well cheered, while those who did not did well lamented. Some even said they did well but pretended not to care. Cheng Imo didn't stop and look back at the list, as he had already known the result. It's also funny to say that he never received so much attention for his perfect scores in exams. However, this time he handed in a blank paper, which caused a sensation in the whole school. At this time, countless gossiping Chanya students were discussing him, and many students were pointing at him around him. Is that the one who handed in the white paper, the bean sprout vegetable with glasses? What's his name? It seems to be called Cheng Imo. Silence. What a strange name. He looks like a bookworm who only knows how to read. He used to get full marks in any subject on the exam, even in Chinese. So suspended. But I'm not sure if I can climb back from class 1 to class 9. If it's really a genius who can score perfect every time, it shouldn't be too difficult. I don't think so. The environment in class 9. TSK. That's right. The various rumors and criticisms around him cannot affect Qingma's mood. If this kind of slander could make him feel uncomfortable, painful, and at a loss, his deformed small heart may have exploded due to overload. Emotional excitement is the biggest enemy for Qingma, who has heart disease. However, these unbridled discussions made Cheng Imo feel that these classmates were like flies, which did not harm you but were particularly annoying. However, Cheng Imo had anticipated such a situation and calmly walked towards his classroom amidst various complex expressions and discussions, as if these people were not talking about him. Not many people went to the teaching building, and most of them were looking at their grades in front of the bulletin board. Qingma slowly walked towards the teaching building. The high school and middle school departments were separated by a playground, and the teaching building with white porcelain tiles shone brightly in the sunlight. In front of the building, there were flags waving in the cold wind. The classroom of Class 1 in Grade 1 is located first on the right, closest to the cafeteria. This means that students in Class 1 can occupy a favorable position for lunch faster than students in Class 9 on the far left. According to Cheng Mo's experience, students in Class 9 arrive on the battlefield at least 5 minutes later than those in Class 1, which means that many delicious dishes can only be seen and cannot be eaten. This made Qingma feel a bit regretful. He will bid farewell to his favorite potato and beef, because he finished last in the grade this time. Starting tomorrow, he will be transferred to the last-ranked class in Grade 9. Here, we must introduce Chanya Middle School. Chanya Middle School is one of the best middle schools in Hunan Province, and it ranks among the top 5 in the ranking of Huaxia Middle School. It is a major school in the north of China every year. As the only high school not located in a super big city, Chanya High School is able to rank among the top 5 in the country not only because of the excellent performance of students in Hunan Province, but also because Chanya's internal competition mechanism is cruel enough to enable them to excel in all exams. Students who enter Chanya Middle School have the awareness of learning for the sake of exams. This is not only the school, but also the arena, and exam results are the only indicator of student excellence. Chanya High School has taken exam-oriented education to the extreme. Except for the scholarship incentive system mentioned earlier, all grades have 9 classes, in order from Class 1 to Class 9. Class 1 ranks in the top 60 of the entire grade, Class 2 ranks in the 61st to 120th of the entire grade, and so on, until Class 9. In the future, scholarships will be collectively referred to as learning points to avoid confusion. All grades of Class 1 enjoy privileges, the highest quality educational resources, the most spacious and bright classrooms, priority when using school materials, and a dedicated Class 1 seating area in the library and cafeteria. The brainwashing style of passionate education, high-pressure management and control, and anti-human success education makes students sharpen their heads and work hard towards the top level of Chanya Middle School in order to gain a superior position. And every time there is a big exam, it will determine which class you will stay in. If someone is promoted, then someone will be demoted. This time, Chingmo submitted a blank paper and finished last, so naturally he will be demoted to the worst performing class, 9. So Chingmo will be downgraded to Class 9, which is known as the garbage class. Tomorrow Chingmo walked slowly back to the classroom. At this moment, there were not many people in the classroom. Most of them were looking at their own and their opponents' grades on the bulletin board. In this school, everyone was in a competitive position, and words like friends and friendship were rare because no one knew if the two would still be in the same class after the next exam, especially Class 1. Chingmo walked straight to the second-to-last seat by the window, which was the seat he had exchanged for with some learning. The reason for changing this seat was not because there was a beautiful woman next to him, but because leaning against the window, he could see the sky outside and feel the sunshine, which could make his mood more calm. In addition, the second-to-last position is also a seat that the teacher is not easily aware of. He can do things he likes, read books he likes, and sleep without being easily noticed. And because there are no beautiful classmates nearby, there is no one competing with him, so the exchange points for this position are relatively low. According to legend, the position near Xie Mingyun, a sophomore in high school, has the highest exchange value in the whole school. Just after the last big exam, Xie Mingyun's seat in the same seat was promoted to 10,000 exchange points, and the back seat was also as high as 7,000, while the front seat was 5,000. This mid-term exam has once again updated the class and seats, which must be another bloody price war. Perhaps the vast majority of people cannot understand why schools set up scholarship electronic vouchers, instead of directly distributing money, but Chengmo understands very well that schools clearly use this method to collect the legitimate ones that are distributed to students. Spending scholarships every year is a significant expense for the school. Although Chanya has money, there are also many places to use the money, including campus maintenance, salaries for teachers and staff, and expenses for organizing various activities. The huge construction of the school still puts Chanya in debt. Where does this large amount of scholarship come from? So there were scholarship electronic vouchers, which also added many inexpensive but tempting things for students, such as the right to choose seats, the right not to wear school uniforms, the limited products of electronic vouchers in cafeterias, and so on. These things are not suitable for students to buy directly with money, but using scholarship electronic vouchers can bring multiple benefits. It can avoid criticism and stimulate students' enthusiasm for learning. More importantly, the school has not spent a penny on them. Chengmo, who has read many economics books, naturally understands that scholarship electronic vouchers, that schools are full of tricks. He feels that spending money to buy something worthless is simply a foolish behavior. You should know that the final exam is the first in the whole grade, and the reward for learning points is only 3,000. Spending money just to sit next to a girl is really wasteful. Chengmo was originally an invisible tycoon of the school. Before this exam, he had accumulated almost 20,000 study points. However, what is somewhat sad now is that he has taken so many first-place exams, accumulated so many study points, and was actually frozen by the school. At this moment, Chengmo sat in his seat and thought to himself, if I had known earlier, it would be better to exchange some things in advance. The classroom of Class 1 in the first year of high school is not only relatively spacious, but also equipped with new single-person multifunctional seats and ergonomic seats. The decoration is also understated and gorgeous in a minimalist style. The warm atmosphere lights allow people to concentrate on learning. In addition to the beautiful decorative trees in the four corners of the classroom, there is also a large compartment at the back, which provides various free drinks, and is equipped with a sink and microwave. It can be said to be extremely luxurious. But all of this was about to say goodbye to Chungmo. Chungmo glanced at the course schedule written on the right side of the blackboard, and the next class was taught by Tang Shui, the math teacher in charge of the class nicknamed Tang Monk. This was bad news for Chungmo. Tang Shui had always regarded him as a proud disciple and had a great fondness for him. After learning that he had submitted all the white papers, he specifically called him to talk and asked for the reason. But Chungmo didn't say anything, just let Tang Shui patiently talk without saying a word. Chungmo's silence also made Tang Shui quite unhappy. After all, Chungmo lowered the average score of Class 1, too much this time. Originally, the people of Class 2 were chasing after them relentlessly, but now there are people with 0 scores in 9 subjects, almost causing the teaching director at his age to lose face. I don't know who stabbed me to where the principal went later. The principal asked him to make sure he understood the status of Cheng Imo, the top scorer and seedling. However, Cheng Imo ignored him and looked for him 3 times, all with the same expression. Don't worry about my expression, which made Tang Shui angry and heartbroken. However, Cheng Mo's troubles are not just limited to Tang Shui. At this moment, with the return of classmates in the class and Shen Mingjia's arrogance entering the classroom surrounded by everyone, Cheng Imo has once again fallen into the center of public opinion. The first person to challenge Cheng Imo was not his competitor Shen Mingjia, but the sports commissioner Tian Bin, who placed a heavy bet on him in this exam. The cause of the incident was that sports commissioner Tian Bin placed a heavy bet on Cheng Imo as the top scorer in this exam. Chanya always learns to gamble during major exams, and the school has always turned a blind eye to such things that can stimulate students' learning. Anyway, gambling is about grades, which also has a stimulating effect on students' enthusiasm for learning. Cheng Imo handed in the white paper, leaving Tian Bin with nothing to return. Of course, this made him very uncomfortable. If Cheng Imo really didn't do well in the exam and lost to Shen Mingjia, then he had nothing to say. However, the result of handing in the white paper was completely unacceptable to Tian Bin. Tian Bin believes that Cheng Imo was definitely intentional. So after Tian Bin walked into the classroom, he walked straight to Cheng Mo's seat and asked very displeased, "Hey, Cheng Mo, what do you mean by handing in the blank paper? Did you do it intentionally?" Cheng Imo looked up at Tian Bin, who was tall and sturdy with a round inch, and ignored him. He turned his head and continued to look at the clear sky outside the window. Tian Bin has a rough appearance, but he is quick-witted and can enter Class 1. He naturally has a strong learning ability. It is said that he has a strong family background and good social connections in the class. Compared to edge figures like Cheng Imo, who are not only good at exams but also useless, he is actually much more powerful. Cheng Mo's indifferent disdain was somewhat unexpected, which made Tian Bin feel that Cheng Mo was against him even more, because everyone in the class knew that he had borrowed some knowledge to make a name for himself in gambling. At this moment, Tian Bin even thought that Cheng Imo had made a bet on himself, so he deliberately failed the exam. Anyway, he could retake Class 1 at any time. This idea and Cheng Mo's indifference made Tian Bin a little angry. He gave a hard pat on the table and sneered, "Cheng Mo, don't be so arrogant. I warn you, if you can't give me a reason and then make me realize that you have also placed a bet on me and deliberately tricked me, then I'm sorry. You must compensate me for all the lost learning points." After a brief pause, Tian Bin added, "Don't play tricks with me. I'll tell you that you can't survive in Changya. No one knows about Cheng Mo's heart disease, because in order to enter school, Qing Yongzi provided him with a fake medical examination form and hospital certificate, which stated that Qing Mo only had severe anemia and was not suitable for physical education classes. There was no mention of heart disease. At this moment, the argument here has long caught the attention of the classmates in the class. The scene of Tianbin questioning into silence was watched by the whole class. Qing Mo remained silent when facing Tianbin's questioning. "I can't beat you, why can't I say the reason for getting a 0 score?" Qing Mo is also very helpless. Qing Mo could have moved his father out and said that his father had just gone to see Marx and his elderly family, and his mood was too heavy to take the exam. However, Qing Mo was worried about what if the school asked him to retake the exam. That's even bigger for the TM to make a fool of themselves. Why not keep quiet? Tianbin saw Qing Mo's clothes looking lifeless, and even if he didn't speak, he felt helpless. Everyone in the class knew that Qing Mo, who didn't attend physical education classes, had some health problems, like anemia. However, he seemed to be sickly all day and couldn't bear the trouble. He can't go too far in front of everyone, he can only think of a way to deal with this kid privately. But now that he easily lets go of Qing Mo, it would be too embarrassing for Tianbin. So Tianbin's mind turned to electricity, thinking that Shenmingjie usually hates genius students who score full marks every time. He laughed loudly and said, "Oh. Qing Mo, you don't like Shenmingjie, so you intentionally lost to her, do you? TSK. You are really a passionate seed. I'm afraid I don't know my feet, so I deliberately took 9 duck eggs." Shenmingjie, who was originally sitting in the front row, was smiling and watching a good show, but she didn't expect Tianbin to bring the matter to her. How can a small person like Qing Mo, who is not good looking and only knows how to read books, and whose framed glasses cover most of her face, deserve to like her? Moreover, she absolutely couldn't accept that Qing Mo deliberately lost because she liked her. Suddenly, Shenmingjie thought that perhaps Qing Mo had upgraded his invigilation equipment because of the school. This time, Qing Mo couldn't cheat, couldn't get a full score, and had no way to get a 0 score. Proud Shenmingjie instantly figured out the reason why Qing Mo got a 0 score in the exam. She stood up from her desk and turned to Tianbin with a red face, sneering, "Tianbin, you're blind yourself. You bet on a cheating scammer. Who can you blame? There's a possibility that you'll pressure him again next time and see if he can get back to class 1. Shenmingjie, a student who studied in Changya in junior high school, has always had an inexplicable sense of superiority compared to other students who were admitted to other schools. It's like the rejection of rural people by city people. Therefore, in the mid-term exam of Qing Mo's first academic year, she scored full marks in 9 subjects and won over Shenmingjie by more than 20 points. Shenmingjie has always regarded Qing Mo, an inconspicuous and weak young man, as a thorn in her eye. However, in the final exams and countless quizzes, Qing Mo scored full marks, which made Shenmingjie, who had always been confident, start to suspect that Qing Mo had used some cheating tricks to comfort herself. She, a person with a natural sense of superiority, is like this. When others are stronger than her, she never feels that her strength is not enough, but suspects that the other party has used some despicable methods. Shenmingjie accused Qing Mo of cheating in front of him, which caused a sensation in the class. However, no one took it seriously. After all, cheating in multiple exams can still be difficult to achieve full marks, especially in Chinese language and composition, where Qing Mo's compositions can serve as model essays. However, this play is really exciting. The story of the top 2 students in the class falling in love and killing each other is not too topical, and watching the excitement is not a big deal. The high school students are all full of energy, so everyone started to cheer, especially the boys, and forced Qing Mo and Shenmingjie to form a CP. This made Shenmingjie even more embarrassed and angry, but she couldn't resist so many people alone. Standing in her seat with red ears and staring at Qing Mo, she gritted her teeth. Qing Mo is also innocent. I didn't say a word, but he actually filled my mind with so many unnecessary plots. I am even more unjust than Yu Fei, but Cheng Yimou knows that the whole class is in a frenzy of gossip. At this time, anything I say can only become evidence of my secret love for Shenmengjie. So Cheng Yimou closed his eyes helplessly. Before the meeting, Tianbin's Qingma closed his eyes, as if an irresistible acquiescence. Shenmengjie was a bit embarrassed and angry, and instantly realized that his guess had some truth. So Tianbin turned his head to look at the boys around him who were teasing him, haha, and laughed. I didn't expect our grade 1. The last Qingma classmate is still a true lover. Your love is deep enough, great enough. Even Shenmengjie is DSS, you cheated, and you don't argue. Cheng Yimou sat in his seat as if nothing had happened around him, as if an old monk had settled down. Shenmengjie had already been dizzy with anger from a group of boys who were fooling around. She couldn't let others think that Cheng Yimou deliberately lost to her because she liked her. So she angrily said, if he didn't cheat, why did the school deduct all the learning points he won? As other members of the crowd, no one cares if Cheng Yimou is cheating. Instead, they are even more curious about whether Cheng Yimou really got a 0 score because of Shenmengjie. They all watch as Cheng Yimou starts whispering to each other, as if he is satisfied. Cheng Yimou deliberately handed in a blank paper because he likes Shenmengjie, otherwise, it wouldn't be completely understandable. At this moment, Tang Shuisheng, also known as Tang Seng, the homeroom teacher, walked in with a thermos in his hand. Seeing the commotion in the class, he couldn't help but frown and say, "What's the noise? Tianbin, why are you standing in the hallway? You haven't returned to your seat yet." However, Tang Seng did not criticize Shenmengjie, who was standing. Tianbin scratched his head and pretended to be naive with a "oh" sound, then bent down and whispered in Qingma's ear, "I will still find your Qingmo. Don't think this matter is over." As Tianbin returned to his seat, the noise in the class gradually subsided. Tang Sanzang, Tang Shui, with gray hair mixed in and toed glasses on, walked up to the podium and placed his thermos on the side. He first glanced at Cheng Yimou sitting by the window and then said, "First of all, we congratulate Shenmengjie for winning first place this time. Secondly, students who are going to be relegated tomorrow should not be discouraged. They can work hard next time and get back. Today, we will explain the math test paper for this midterm exam. Everyone, take their papers first." Qingma looked at his blank paper and felt a great headache. In fact, Qingma didn't intentionally hand in the blank paper. He couldn't do any of the questions on the paper, but the vast majority of the questions that were originally easy for him have now become even more difficult. Let him take the exam at this moment, and a 0 score is definitely not possible. There is a chance for him to score 4 or 5/10 blindly, but that is not a silent style. He always only writes accurate answers. Moreover, even if he gets 4 or 5/10, it is still of no use. He will definitely be the last place, and it is better to submit a blank paper. Cheng Yimou had no intention of listening to Tang Monk explain the questions. He could understand all of these questions, but he couldn't effectively correspond with the formulas in his memory. He knew it was a cognitive impairment disease, so he knew it. Cheng Yimou also knew that his cognitive impairment was related to the relics left by his father, which was why he dared not say he was sick and had to score 0. Cheng Yimou quietly rolled up the sleeve of his left school uniform, which was tied with a white wristwatch. The reason it was said to be tied was because the watch was tightly tied to Cheng Mo's fair and thin wrist, as if it was stuck to the skin, unable to move even half of it. This watch is completely indistinguishable from its material. Most watches have a brand logo on the dial, but there are only 3 silver pointers floating and rotating on the white, electronic screen-like dial, and there is no time scale on the dial. This strange watch, which looks both electronic and mechanical, is a relic left by Qingma's father, Qing Yongzi. Since Qingma attended his father's funeral and brought this watch, he has fallen into cognitive impairment and lost his associative ability. Cheng Yimou couldn't figure out the purpose of this watch at all, but after studying it for a long time, he found that his cognitive impairment was definitely related to this watch, because as long as he pressed the button next to it in the dark, the hands on the dial would disappear, presenting a colorful 9-pointed star-shaped gene chain. As Cheng Mo was placing his hand in the drawer, pondering over what the watch was and what its functions were, Tang Shui shouted, "Cheng Mo, get up and answer this question." Cheng Mo heard Tang Shui's voice and put down his sleeve from the desk. Then he stood up and looked at the chalk words on the blackboard. Let P and P+2 be prime numbers, Pan 3, sequence. This is the last question of this math exam, a high-difficulty math competition-level question, in order to widen the score difference. If it had been in the past, for Cheng Mo, such a problem would have been a child's play, solved in minutes. However, now he looks at these letters and numbers, and his mind cannot remember the formulas related to them, so he can only remain silent. Tang Shui looked at Cheng Mo without saying a word and frowned, saying, "Can't you solve this problem?" He knew Cheng Mo's level, which should not be difficult for the young man in front of him. But Cheng Mo let Tang Shui down. He nodded lightly and said, "I can't solve this problem." There was another commotion in the class. Tang Shui remained silent for a moment and said, "Sit down." Shenmengjie, get up and answer. Shenmengjie, who had a slender figure, stood up from her seat and said, "This problem is really simple. My problem-solving approach is like this." In the luxurious classroom, the light and cheerful voice of Shenmengjie echoes like a silver bell. People's attention shifts away from the silent loser, and the halo of the former learning genius gradually disappears. The solitary person who already has this advantage becomes even more insignificant. Cheng Mo sat down expressionlessly and thought to himself, no matter what reason you can't do it, you just can't do it, even if you say you can't do it due to cognitive impairment, in order to gain sympathy. Get mercy. He would rather not say it. Cheng Mo understands that sympathy and pity from others are meaningless, and these are not good emotions. Those who are pitied must accept the slightly disdainful perfunctory aspects of pity. Cheng Mo never believed in others, he knew that only himself was his savior. Seeking collections, seeking recommended tickets. Note 1. The Red Queen hypothesis was proposed by evolutionary biologist L. Van Vallen from the University of Chicago in 1973 based on the story of Alice's adventures in the mirror. Natural selection only leads to the current adaptation of organisms, while evolutionary function is the potential adaptation or future adaptation ability. There are currently two hypotheses that can more or less explain the evolution of genetic structures with evolutionary functions, namely the Red Queen hypothesis and species selection. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Genius Password of Pedestrian A. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Genius Password of Pedestrian A. A person may not believe in their own abilities, but they cannot believe in their own beliefs. Cheng Mo went to the office and accepted Tang Shui's inquiry. However, he didn't say anything and went back to the classroom to tidy up the things inside the table. Starting from tomorrow, the position where he could look up at the blue sky no longer belongs to him. Compared to being demoted to class 9 of the first year of high school, Cheng Mo cares more about all his learning points being deducted, losing many rights that should have been obtained. The classroom was already empty. Cheng Mo packed his backpack and looked at the watch on his wrist. He began to consider whether to go to the hospital to take a look and find a way to remove the watch. As his cognitive impairment worsened, he once contacted Li Jiting to give the watch to him, but he couldn't get in touch. This also made Cheng Mo feel extremely strange. Cheng Mo put down the sleeves of his school uniform and walked out of the classroom of Class 1 in the first year of high school. The sunlight jumped onto his pale cheeks, and the strong sunlight after 4 o'clock gave him a feeling of dizziness. Cheng Mo squinted his eyes and glanced at the playground. There were students playing football after school, and the cries spread far in the open campus. He stood silently in the hallway and stopped for a moment before turning and walking towards the school gate. The slanting sun pulled his slender shadow long, like a malnourished giant. Stepping out of the teaching building, the breeze was pleasant and the eyes were covered in emerald color. Chania Middle School is located at the foot of the Uelu Mountain, with a high school and junior high school departments, 2 playgrounds, 6 basketball courts, an indoor sports hall, a swimming pool, and a library. The campus area is relatively large in the middle school, not only because the children of the wealthy in Hunan province are studying in Chania, so the infrastructure is also comparable to a noble school. Looking around, except for some historical high school teaching buildings that are slightly old, all other buildings are very fashionable and modern beautiful buildings. For example, the Chania Library that Qinghua passes by at this moment is a square structure covered with a large area of glass, shining like a crystal box in the sunlight. It is a good place for studying and taking a nap, especially at noon in summer. The abundant air conditioning and the sunlight pouring through the glass create a subtle harmony, making you neither feel cold nor hot. On the right side of the sports hall, there is a huge cylinder with a flat roof. However, the cylinder is not very high and seems to be flattened. Furthermore, further away, on the back of the high school teaching building, which is out of sight at this moment, is the thermostatic swimming pool of Chania High School. This swimming pool can be considered a pioneer building, consisting of 3 irregular triangular roofs that resemble the shape of the Shini Opera House, but it is not as complex and far from that large. The buildings of Chania are lined with greenery and connected to the nearby Uelu Mountain, which seems to be surrounded by mountains. In fact, this place is not remote and can be considered as the sub-center of Xinjiang. The entire Uelu Mountain belongs to Xiangnan University City, and Chania is located on the edge of the university city. To the left of the school gate is Xiangnan Normal University, and to the left of the road is the best university Uelu Academy in Hunan Province. Here, there are numerous academic institutions, making it a gathering place of talents. The streets and alleys are lined with pavilions, corners, bridges, and piers, and there are photocopy shops, bookstores, stationery stores, and instrument stores, all shining with brilliant cultural storylines. Among them, there are snack shops, roadside stalls, ice shops, and Starbucks, which not only comfort the taste buds, but also the youthful and colorful leisure time of the students. Cheng Yimo walked towards the school gate from the teaching building amidst a crowd of people in groups of 3 or 2. At this time, it was already past the peak period for leaving the school, so the diamond brick paved walkway was not crowded. However, the school gate was crowded with people, and many cars could be seen from afar to pick up people. Some nearby students also rode bicycles back home, and of course, more people like Cheng Yimo chose to take the subway and bus home. The school is in Heshi, while Chengma's home is in Dingwangtai in Hedong. Generally, Chengma takes bus 202 directly to his doorstep. Cheng Yimo squeezed out the school gate and walked right for about 300 steps to reach the bus stop. It was peak time for taking the bus, and some students wearing Chania Middle School uniforms gathered at the bus stop, waiting for the bus in groups of 3 or 2. There were few people like Cheng Yimo who were alone. Chengma has long been accustomed to loneliness, and making friends is meaningless for him. He cannot participate in activities that most high school students are passionate about, except for playing computer games, which he is quite skilled at. However, Chengma is not particularly enthusiastic about playing games. Basically, he has no common language with his peers, and it is reasonable for him to not urinate in a pot, but in the eyes of most of Chengma's classmates, Chengma is like an unsociable otaku, some of whom are not detached from the world, but rather have a middle school sophomore temperament that thinks he is the savior after reading too many comics. Actually, no one knows, nor does anyone care about what Chengma really likes or what illness he has, so he cannot exercise. Cheng Yimo stood alone at a distance from the crowd waiting for the bus, as if there was an invisible boundary between him and the noisy world. Although the distance was too far, it was very likely that he could not squeeze into the bus, but he didn't mind. Waiting for an extra trip would only take 8 minutes. There are not many college students who need to cross the river, and the vast majority of their competitors are from their own school. When all the people in the school leave, they can still get a seat in the car. As the saying goes, good things never go out, bad things spread far and wide. At this moment, some people are pointing fingers at Cheng Imo, and he doesn't have to think about what they are discussing. After his feat of 0 points in 7 subjects was publicly criticized by Mediterranean Wu at the midterm meeting, it seemed like he had become a celebrity. This is the person from class 1 of high school who often gets full marks in exams. He got 9 zeros this time. Do you know why he is? Why? It is said to be because I like Shinmungjie, in order to make her win first place in grade once. This confession is too unique and romantic. I think he's overthinking it. How could a proud woman like Shinmungjie possibly like him? He's just too ordinary and not tall. Actually, I think he's quite impressive, and this way of showing love can also be imagined. If it were Senior Du Ling doing this, it would be called romance, but he is too overconfident. If he doesn't return to class 1, in the final exam, it would be a joke. Although Ching Mo's health was not very good, his hearing was still quite good. All these trivial and absurd discussions had reached his ears. He was not angry about these words, but was surprised by the incredible speed of the spread of rumors. It was unexpected that at this moment, his rumor of liking Shinmungjie had already reached the level of being well known in Chanya Middle School. This makes him very helpless. He can understand the restlessness of adolescent boys and girls, but as far as he is concerned, he has no interest in love, and Qingma will not refute rumors. He knows that ordinary people like him can only fall on the edge without good grades, so he does not have the qualification to be discussed sustainably. He only occasionally appears in the mouth of his classmates. Qingma knew that soon they would forget a thin and weak boy named Qingma. As alumni pointed at Cheng Imo and laughed incessantly, the crowd waiting for the bus exclaimed in surprise. It turned out to be a silver Rolls-Royce passing in front of the bus station. The students of Chanya Middle School immediately changed the topic, and Cheng Mo's name disappeared with the wind because the person sitting in the bus was Chanya's influential figure Xie Minyun. Cheng Imo followed everyone's gaze and saw a side face inside the car window, as bright as an iceberg under the sun. The green leaves and mottled light spots of the roadside trees were reflected on the smooth car body, and all the natural beauty became her backdrop. This scene was as brilliant as a segment of an idol drama, but there was no scene where the two people's eyes met in the air. The other party didn't turn their head, and Qingma didn't look much. He knew clearly that the one in the car must be the female protagonist, while he was just an insignificant passerby. So Qingma didn't follow the expensive Rolls-Royce with his gaze like everyone else. He just glanced and quickly turned his head to see if the 202 bus he needed to take had arrived. While others were still staring at the taillights with envy or admiration, he had already walked to the curb and occupied the most favorable position for getting on after returning home. Cheng Mo's uncle Cheng Jidong had not yet returned. Cheng Imo took a cup of warm water from the water purifier and went straight into his room. He opened his computer, clicked to play Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 in B-flat minor, and then entered Chanya's internal learning software to start practicing. He must refer to books to solve problems, which may be slow but can still solve problems completely. After fainting on the day of his father's funeral, Cheng Imo did not find anything wrong because he occasionally fainted suddenly due to severe hypoxia. Although this situation is rare, it has not happened before, so he was not taken seriously by his uncle and aunt. When Qingma woke up, he looked up and saw that the watch on his wrist was rotating normally, and his body was not abnormal. Therefore, he believed that he must have felt that the wind in the parking lot was too strong, and his breathing was not smooth, causing him to faint due to a temporary lack of oxygen in his heart and lungs. Therefore, Qingma also felt that the feeling of some watches coming back to life at that time was just an illusion. However, later on, Qingma discovered that the strange watch could not be taken off at all. After studying for a while, Qingma thought it might be a high-tech watch that monitors the condition of the body, so he ignored it. As the exam approached, Cheng Imo discovered that his cognitive abilities began to show signs of impairment. Generally, ordinary people thought that cognitive impairment meant memory problems, but in reality, the symptoms of cognitive impairment were very diverse, and memory impairment was just one of them. Cheng Imo did not immediately go to the hospital. He first downloaded a set of tests for cognitive impairment from the internet and did it himself. His score was quite high, with only one test for associative learning scoring very low. This means that he experienced obstacles when he remembered something related to the current perception or thinking. He can only complete basic word pairing associations, such as simple associations such as silence tacit agreement contract, while deeper and more complex associations are simply impossible to carry out. The next weekend, when he was on vacation, he went to the hospital and underwent some routine examinations. Originally, he was supposed to have an MRI, but because his watch couldn't be removed, it couldn't be made. The doctor also looked at his watch and said he didn't have such a health monitoring device. He asked him to find a way to remove the watch and have a complete examination. At this moment, Cheng Imo began to suspect whether the watch was causing his cognitive impairment. Because when he couldn't take off his watch, he called Li Jiting. However, Li Jiting's phone was already in a long-term shutdown state and never passed. Although not being able to contact Li Jiting made Cheng Imo feel that the situation was even more suspicious, he did not tell anyone about it. Cheng Imo had always felt that no one could rely on him, except for himself. Faced with all these difficulties, Cheng Ma had no intention of giving up. In the days of fighting against the disease, he learned a little. Even if he couldn't overcome the disease, if he didn't even have the belief to overcome it, he would definitely die faster. He is not someone who gives up easily. Before the exam, Cheng Imo memorized formulas all night long, but it didn't make much difference. During the exam, he still couldn't remember the formulas he had memorized countless times. Therefore, he decided to change his approach to practicing questions. He doesn't care about his grades, but he doesn't like others to laugh at him. Cheng Imo felt that even illness could not hinder him, let alone that he was not yet terminally ill. In order to overcome the illness, return to class 1, and consolidate his associative ability, he planned to do at least 100 questions today. The internal app of Chanya High School is not accessible to students from other schools because registration requires the use of a student ID. This app can be said to be the internal competition circle of Chanya High School. Those who can rank in the top few of the question brushing and solving lists are all good students. Among them, the ID that has long been ranked first on the question brushing and solving lists is called Queen from Outer Space, which is said to be Xie Minyan's. Xie Minyan was selected by board Chanya students as the top talent and beauty in Chanya. Pursuers can at least circle the Chanya campus of Nanjing University twice. She once participated in a highly rated variety show in Hunan province called Study Well, which caused a sensation on social networks with sharp words, profound knowledge, and amazing beauty. She was immediately dubbed Xiaoxian Goddess by netizens. That's why someone called her Xiaoxian Goddess at the midterm conference. However, these gossips have nothing to do with Cheng Imo. He has been isolated from women since childhood. On the surface, this insulation may be due to his lack of communication and ordinary appearance. At a deeper level, it was destined after his mother left him and returned to the United States. And Cheng Ma's ID is called Running Fatty. Some of his data, such as the number of questions he answered and his accuracy rate, were hidden by Cheng Ma, so he did not rank on the list. No one knew that his number of questions he answered was 5 times that of the first place, Queen from Outer Space, and his accuracy rate reached 98%. As for the problem.solving list, he is not interested in answering other people's questions, so the data is 0. Once Cheng Imo enters the state of learning, he feels isolated from the world like an old monk settling down. Unlike ordinary people, for him, being able to persist in dry and boring practice questions for a long time is because it is his own way of exercising and entertainment. In fact, the reason why Cheng Imo is able to score full marks every time is not because of his high IQ. His father, Cheng Yongzi, has an IQ of over 180, while he is only between 130 and 140, which can only be considered excellent, and there is still a gap between him and genius. His second perfect score comes entirely from diligence. He studied The Theory of 10,000 Hours of Genius very early, authored by Daniel Coyle. Visited the world's most successful football players, bank robbers, violinists, fighter pilots, artists, and skateboarders to analyze for readers how to become a genius in a professional field. The foundation of this book is derived from the myelin theory in biology, Note 1. Simply put, through 10,000 hours of intensive practice, myelin is used to wrap insulation around neural circuits. The thicker the myelin, the stronger the insulation, and the more precise and agile our actions and thinking become. The conclusion drawn from scientific analysis in this book is that there are only a very small number of geniuses with protruding spiritual orifices in the world, and the majority of geniuses are achieved through deep practice and continuous strengthening of the myelin sheath of neural circuits. So, at any time, as long as you give yourself a goal, persist, practice repeatedly, and repeat again, you can also become a genius in this field. Therefore, Chunma's good grades are actually built on a lot of time spent studying and practicing questions, and his efforts have also verified that 10,000 hours of genius theory. The extensive practice of practicing questions has made him a genius in learning or exams. Chunma focused on solving the questions until 6:30 p.m., until his uncle Ching Jidong prepared a meal and called for him to eat before stopping. He only worked on 12 questions in an hour and a half, which was extremely bad data for Chunma. In the past, he could solve at least 30 difficult questions in an hour and a half, flipping through books to find matching formulas, which wasted too much of his time. After finishing his meal, Chunma continued his journey of solving problems and didn't finish the planned 100 questions until 11:30. However, before going to bed, he looked back at the first question he had solved and was still confused. This made him a little frustrated because the 100 questions he was practicing today were all about the application of the same formulas. Cheng Imo turned off the desk lamp and lay on the bed. The black sky outside the window seemed to be dark, and the 2 rows of dazzling lights on People's Road cast the shadow of the night. The traffic in the city at midnight was still crowded, and the prosperity of the city had nothing to do with him. He had become humble from a small age and may even disappear. He began to ponder from a young age why he lived, and to this day he has not found the answer. However, he does not want to leave any traces, only a tombstone. Chunma thought to himself, if 100 questions are of no use, then I will brush 10,000 questions. If there is really no other way, we can only find a way to forcibly open this watch. Even if we want to damage our father's belongings, there is no other way. He pressed the switch, closed the electric curtains, and the bedroom was plunged into darkness. He then raised his hand to look at the white watch on his wrist. In the pitch black, the 3 silver hands were rotating like a regular clock. When he pressed the knob next to him, a gene chain shaped like a 9-pointed star appeared again on the dial, which was like a monitor. But what's strange is that this time the 9-pointed star is composed of 3 equilateral triangles, 2 of which are diagonally drawn. One of them has changed from the originally rotating multicolored gene chain to a sky like deep blue, while the other has 2 edges that turn black and gray. Only the upright equilateral triangle in the middle remains unchanged, and it is still a rotating colorful gene chain. Cheng Imo was greatly surprised. He released the knob and sat up against the bedside in the darkness. Looking down again, the watch returned to its normal pointer mode. Pressing the knob, the white surface remained the same as what he had just seen, a 9-pointed star with a changed color. Cheng Imo repeated several times, still like this. He tried to rotate the knob while pressing it, and the result was the same as before, but there was no response. He tried to pull the knob outward again, and the knob that couldn't be moved a few times before easily popped up with a snap. At this moment, a strange sight appeared, and a human figure with green, blue, and gray light dots stood flat in the middle of the dial, with a middle finger high. Below the waist, the human body was only hovering like a gene chain. These green, blue, and gray light dots float in the pitch black, like dust under sunlight. No, to be precise, they should be like the flowing Milky Way in the deep universe. Cheng Yimou looked at this beautiful scene, his mouth wide open, and he was simply stunned. He didn't believe that technology had developed to such an extent that a small watch could create such a beautiful holographic projection. He instinctively touched the beautiful firefly-like dots with his right middle finger, without any tactile sensation. However, the dots twisted and splashed in the air as if they were tangible, like suddenly exploding fireworks, but in a moment they returned to their original state. This wonderful human body, composed of dots of light, has a green progress bar shining continuously above its head, which reads: Gene recognition, sequencing, and DNA reading have been completed 55%, and below the green body light and shadow, another red progress bar is displayed. Carrier, Note 2, completion rate of 37%, Note 1, myelin theory. The more deeply ingrained a habit is in the human nervous system, the deeper the myelin sheath surrounds it. A person's behavior habits are similar to a circuit, and myelin is the insulating material that wraps around this circuit. With the continuous persistence of deep practice, this package will become thicker and eventually become a genius's talent. The myelin sheath grows throughout life, although it gradually disintegrates with age. Continuous practice will maintain its stability. If we don't reinforce a circuit for 3 months, it will be like it never existed before, and your previous efforts will be in vain. For example, playing the piano, even the best pianist on this planet would say, if I don't play for a day, I will know. If I don't play for 2 days, my wife will know. If I don't play for 3 days, the whole world will know. And the myelin doesn't care who you are, only what you do. So, the way to increase myelin is through deep practice. Myelin formula. Deep practice x 10,000 hours equals world.class skill. The key to the 10,000 hour rule is that there are no exceptions. No one can reach world.class standards in just 3,000 hours, 7,500 hours is not enough. Be sure to spend 10,000 hours. 10 years, 3 hours a day. No matter who you are. But the most crucial thing is not time, but the method. It's not that you can become a genius by practicing for 10,000 hours, but to practice deeply. Deep practice. Not just a simple struggle, but a purposeful struggle. Selecting goals, striving for them, evaluating gaps, and returning to the initial steps. Deep practice requires a spirit of nitpicking and persevering to the end. Note 2, Vector. A tool that uses recombinant DNA technology to deliver a useful target DNA fragment into recipient cells for reproduction and expression is called a vector. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Garbage Squad. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Garbage Squad. At 5:30, when Cheng Yimou was woken up by the alarm clock, she still had some thick black circles under her eyes. Although she was still tired, Cheng Yimou did not hesitate or lie in bed. She rubbed her eyes, lifted the blanket, and got up directly. Yesterday, he went to bed a little late for the first time and spent a lot of time researching this magical watch. However, he searched through search engines and found no such high-tech watch on both Chinese and foreign websites. It should be noted that the equipment for gene recognition and sequencing is not only expensive, but also bulky, making it impossible to assemble such a small watch. Based on current technological developments, this should be an impossible thing to exist. But Cheng Yimou didn't think it was a bluff either. Just by touching the scattered light dots with his hand based on the holographic image, he could tell that this watch had a good reputation. In addition, this is a relic specially given to his father by Li Jiting, indicating that this watch is definitely not simple. After waking up, Cheng Yimou pulled out the knob and looked at it again. The progress bar had increased slightly compared to what he saw last night. At this moment, the gene recognition, sequencing, and DNA reading above the human body, composed of light dots, had reached 60%. The completion rate of the red progress bar carrier displayed below the green human body light and shadow reaches 41% last night. There were constantly rotating gene chains below the waist, but in the morning, the length of the gene chain decreased slightly and the length of the body increased slightly. It is obvious that when the two progress bars are red, the light and shadow of the human body will also be completed. Cheng has some doubts whether this is a health smart watch launched by a certain company that can check physical conditions, such as measuring heart rate, blood pressure, electrocardiogram, etc. It turns out that he has also worn such electronic watches before, but this watch is much taller and more upscale, with genes and DNA coming up. However, perhaps these are just gimmicks to scare people. Cheng is currently unsure of what this watch is for, so he won't be overthinking it. Anyway, after all the data is read, there should be new clues. Cheng cleanly washed his face and brushed his teeth, put on his school uniform, boiled an egg in the kitchen, brewed oatmeal, brewed a glass of milk, and then carried his somewhat heavy backpack to school. When he walked out of the house, his uncle Cheng Jidong had not yet woken up. Standing in the dimly lit elevator room waiting for the elevator, Cheng took out his phone and glanced at the time. As usual, it was 6:15 when he left. He would arrive at the 202 bus station downstairs around 6:25 and take the first bus at 6:30 to reach the school around 7 o'clock. It would take about 11 minutes to walk from the bus station to the classroom, so he could reach the classroom around 7:10. Based on Cheng Mo's experience in the past 6 months, these data have a maximum error of 3 minutes. The only time a significant error occurred was when the bus driver collided with a person riding an electric bike. Cheng Mo's life is dull and boring, running like a clock every day. For a heart disease patient, a regular lifestyle is the best way to extend their life. He walked out of the community, and in the early morning of May, the air was filled with a clear chill. On the opposite side of the street, a large bucket of hot powder was steaming, and the steamed bun shop had a high steamer yard. However, no one had visited this spot yet. Occasionally, electric scooters with a sizzling sound slid past the damp street like fish. Most of the rolling gates of the shops on both sides were pulled, and the pedestrians were sparse, making it appear somewhat deserted. All the sounds of the morning were like light drumming in his ears, like the faint sunlight at the bus stop. Cheng Mo stood up at the bus stop, looked up at the bright red sun, and took a deep breath of the slightly cold air. Every morning was precious to him, and he had to thank him for waking up on that day. Silently waiting, some outdated 202 pulled and roared with some effort to reach Dingwangtai station. The car body with a female celebrity advertisement stopped in front of Cheng Mo, and after a long sigh of spat, the car door opened. Cheng Mo boarded the bus carrying his black leather backpack. There were only a few scattered people in the car, and there were also students wearing Chanya Middle School uniforms. Cheng Mo took off his backpack and casually found a seat to sit down because he had to change classes today, and all the textbooks and materials were in his backpack, making it particularly heavy. The bus stopped and walked over a bridge over the Xiangjiang River, arrived at Ingwan town, turned left, and entered the range of Shida. After 2 more stops, it arrived at the Shida Sports Center, where it was the place to get off. At this time, groups of students wearing Chanya school uniforms were walking on the sidewalk towards the school. As usual, Cheng Mo followed the crowd and entered the campus. Birds were singing in the woods on both sides of the trail. This was a holy land for dating young boys and girls with early love. On the playground, there were sports students dragging tires to sprint back and forth, while beautiful boys and girls were slowly running in circles. Walking into the teaching building, you could hear Lang Lang's reading voice, but it was slightly noisy and without any rhythm. Cheng Mo walked towards class 9, and naturally passed through the front class 1. He didn't look inside, but obviously someone noticed him. After a night of fermentation, Cheng Mo and Shen Mengjie formed the Shenqing CP, who ranked last and first in the order of the whole grade. They became a topic of discussion in school. Although Cheng Mo was not a hot topic in school, he still had some popularity. What's important is that the beautiful Shenmengjie has always been a focal point in school. Seeing Qingma walking through the classroom, a bored boy shouted in the classroom, "Shenmengjie, you're not with Qingma. I'm really sorry that he sacrificed so much. But he's going to the garbage class of class 9, for you." Then a burst of cheerful laughter rang out in the classroom, and the sound of being together echoed loudly throughout the entire room. Even the person next door, too, ran out to see what had happened. Cheng Imo walked expressionlessly through the windows that squeezed his face, following his predetermined pace slowly, without wanting to accelerate his pace due to these boring noises. When he walked to the back door of Class 1 with his backpack on his back, Shenmengjie's graceful figure appeared in his field of vision. Although Shenmengjie, dressed in a Chanya school uniform, was not as stunning as Xie Minyun, she was still a beautiful woman with a pale oval face, blushing cheeks, and a vibrant youthful aura all over her body. Her long hair was draped over her shoulders, her almond eyes were wide and deep, but her eyelids were a bit swollen. It was probably because she didn't sleep well last night, but this did not detract from her exquisite beauty. On the other hand, Qingma, who was as thin as a bamboo pole, sat in his school uniform, wearing a slightly rustic black framed glasses. His hair was messy as if it had not been tidied up, and his backpack bent his back a bit. Due to lack of sleep, he looked particularly haggard. Coupled with his already reserved and gloomy temperament, he looked like an introverted, negative, and friendless social worker, like a otaku who only enjoys watching pornographic videos, playing 18 forbidden games, or masturbating with his idol at home. This image contrasts sharply with Shenmengjie, making people lament how far the distance between people can be. Many people crowded around the back door to watch the excitement. Qingma didn't look askance, as if Shenmengjie didn't exist. However, when Qingma passed her by, Shenmengjie said with a hint of anger, "Qingma, try not to pass by the door of Class 1 in the future. I don't want others to use you to laugh at me." This is not a discussion, nor a warning, but a notification. Cheng Imo did not respond and walked steadily towards Class 9 at the end of the corridor, leaving behind a series of pointing, chuckling, and loud discussions without any hesitation. "How about I start trading and see if I can retake the top spot in the final exam? First in grade. Whether or not I can get back to Class 1, is a question. I don't think it's a big problem for Cheng Imo to come back. It's just unlikely to get a full score in 9 subjects. Didn't Shenmengjie say he was cheating? This shouldn't be possible. In summary, we will know the answer for the final exam. Wow! Then there will be a good show to watch in this final exam." Qingma completely ignored some things and walked through the long corridor to reach Class 9. When he arrived, Qingma was slightly surprised. Although self-study started at 7:20 in the morning, other classes usually had almost everyone at 7:10. However, in Class 9, there were only a few people sitting sparsely in the classroom. These people were not reading, either gathered together to talk, or lying on the desk sleeping. For Class 9, Qingma doesn't know much. He only knows that most of them are children of powerful families, either they have paid a lot of money or they have connections. When Chanya Middle School first implemented the learning point system and promotion and demotion, some people tried to get their children to the upper classes, but it didn't work. Those who needed to be demoted would still be demoted, and they couldn't always find connections, so there were no parents trying to do this in Chanya. As the class moves forward, competition becomes more intense and personnel turnover increases. Compared to other classes, Class 9 has almost no personnel turnover, and the 70 people in the class consistently rank at the bottom, hence it is called the garbage class. These people don't care either. They don't pursue good universities. They all have very good resources. Either they are recommended or they come abroad to study in Chanya just because this is the best middle school in southern Hunan, chosen by their parents. They have no other choice. When Cheng Imo walked into the classroom, one of the few dozen or so people turned their heads to look at him. One of them, a chubby man sitting on a desk with his feet on a stool, pointed at Cheng Imo and said, "Isn't this the genius who studied for the 9 science exams? I didn't expect you to actually come to our class. Cheng-Mo did not express any opinion on the chubby man's impolite remarks. He just took off his backpack and placed it on the back of his foot, asking, "Where is the available space?" The tall and sturdy fat man smiled and pointed to the last seat by the window, saying, "There's no one sitting there, you can sit there." Sitting behind the fat man, Moxigan, who was just talking, looked at him in surprise and wanted to say something, but the fat man blinked at him, and Moxigan remained silent. Because the fat man's broad body blocked Chingma's gaze, Chingma did not see Moxigan's expression, but everyone else stared at him walking towards that position, making him feel a bit eerie. Cheng-Mo walked to the last position and took a look. There were no books in the drawer, and the desk was very clean, unlike someone who had sat before. So he placed his backpack on the desk and sat down. Generally speaking, because there are too many textbooks, exercises, and reference materials, students tend to put a lot of books in their desks. Therefore, to determine if this seat is occupied, just check if there is anything in the drawer. After sitting down, Chingma ignored the scrutiny around him and opened his backpack to start reading. He understood the value of time more than anyone else. As the self-study bell rang, the people of class 9 arrived one after another during the morning's self-study, and everyone was somewhat surprised to take a few more glances at Chingma, who was immersed in the sea of books. This surprise also brought some schadenfreude in preparation for watching good movies. It's just a silence where my mind is completely focused on studying, and I haven't noticed anything at all when the self-study was about to end at 8 o'clock. A man appeared at the entrance of the class who was not wearing a school uniform and dyed yellow hair. He was wearing a school uniform and dyeing his hair, which would not force him to correct his behavior. He would only change his learning points. Therefore, if you have enough learning points, it's okay to keep your hair long and dye it into colorful clothes. Once your learning points are not enough, you will immediately be caught by the student union and forced to lose your hair and change into school uniforms. The yellow-haired man is quite handsome, a typical Korean version of a handsome guy, with hair combed back, sword eyebrows and starry jade face with thin lips. He is wearing ripped jeans and a black Givenchy Saint Girl pullover, holding a phone in his hand and not carrying a backpack. After he walked into the classroom, the whole room suddenly became silent, and his gaze was all focused on him. Only Chingma, who was completely immersed in learning, was still working on the exam paper. The yellow-haired man saw Cheng-Mo sitting in his seat from a distance. He frowned and walked straight towards him with the wind direction. Under the gaze of more than 60 people, Huang Mao kicked the desk, which made a loud noise. The plastic-wrapped iron legs of the desk rubbed against the floor, making a piercing sound. Cheng-Mo's ink pen pulled out a long black mark on this mostly empty test paper. He looked up and saw the face of an idle drama male protagonist. The sunlight poured down from the window, shining on his side face. A diamond earring was shining brightly. Then a cold voice reached his eardrums. "I'll count 3 times, you get out of here." Chapter 8. Reward of 5,000 starting coins. No one has guessed the exact gold finger yet. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Fly Catcher Bottle, 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Fly Catcher Bottle, 1. What is philosophy? It's pointing the way for flies to escape from the fly trap. Ludwig Wittgenstein, the sunlight is like diluted golden water, creating sparkling waves through the glass. It is coated in every corner of the classroom, and the snow-white walls and great paintings hanging on them decorate this youthful and holy place. At this moment, this place that should have been pure seemed very unfriendly to Chingma. After the sound of "I'll count 3 times, get out of here," Chingma instantly understood what was going on. Looking back at his past, Chingma has been striving to achieve good grades because he is well aware of some potential game rules in life. Good grades are a powerful talisman that not only allows you to win the favor of teachers, but also instills a sense of awe in your classmates. Therefore, having a dazzling good grade is also his protection for a weak body, so that no one dares to bully you. It should be noted that children with good grades have different effects from ordinary children reporting to teachers. Especially when that child is still well-behaved, sensible, and sick, male teachers tend to lean towards helping, let alone female teachers. He once had to transfer a classmate when he was in elementary school, and since then, all his classmates have been walking around him. This matter is a long story, it's not worth mentioning. But at this moment, the situation is completely different. Not to mention that high school students are more complex, their former, protective color. Good grades has also become a burden. In the garbage class, 9, everyone's grades are not good, and for the entire Changya Middle School, each grades, 9, class is a special existence. Because these children have relatively good family conditions, most of them have the capital to be willful. Therefore, after entering this environment, they either give up their studies and live a mediocre life, or develop a rebellious mentality that is not ashamed but proud. They have to stay here under the high-pressure policies of the school and parents, but they probably only have a strong aversion to the parents and the school. Therefore, it is inevitable for people like Ching Mo to come to this class and be targeted. You should know that where there are people, there is society. Where there is society, there are circles. Those who are not soluble in circles will definitely be excluded and targeted. Cheng Yimo is a complete outsider in this class. For Cheng Yimo, this is his first exam question to enter this class. If he starts feeling disheartened and leaves without saying a word, he will be seen as a weak person in the future, and being bullied may become the norm. If he were to confront the boy in front of him head-on, he would have already fallen for it. In Class 9, which emphasizes the rules of the jungle, he is simply at the bottom of the food chain. And the man in front of him, judging from his unconventional attire and arrogant behavior, undoubtedly ranks at the top of the food chain in Class 9. If there is a conflict between himself and this man, not only will he be punished now, but his future life at the class level will also be difficult. It is necessary to transfer the anger of the other party, but if the fat guy asks him to sit here, he will also be looked down upon because he has become someone else's plaything without thinking. As a refined egoist, face is not the most important thing, but admitting mistakes is definitely not the best option. This will make his already passive position in this class even worse. He lacks a strong physique, a strong background, and the only thing he can rely on is wisdom. However, the current silence is still far from wisdom, and in fact, he has read too many theoretical books here, making things too complex. Cheng Yimo looked calmly at the handsome boy in front of him and said calmly, "I'm sorry, I took the wrong seat, but I hope you can use polite language to reduce friction between us." At this moment, everyone in Class 9 turned their heads to look at this most remote corner of the classroom, and upon hearing the silent answer, everyone became excited. This ignorant kid is going to cause trouble. You should know that standing in front of him is the famous playboy from Changya Middle School, Fu Yuanjua, nicknamed Side Effects. No one knows his specific background, only that although he doesn't abide by school rules, he can't finish his studies and the principal will smile when he sees him. Fu Yuanjua inserted his hands into his pants and looked at Qingma's slightly emaciated cheeks. He sneered and said, "Oh. Polite language. So now I say, please get out of here. This way, your heart will feel better." Cheng Yimo sat in his seat and looked up at the slender figure of Fu Yuanjua, saying, "I don't know, I just think you're a bit overbearing." Fu Yuanjua did not answer Cheng Yimo, but coldly spat out the word, "one." Cheng Yimo still didn't stand up, and he quickly said, "According to the second and fourth items of the school rules, those who engage in a fight and fight with serious circumstances, those who hit someone and cause injury, use a lethal weapon or provide a lethal weapon to others, they will be given a warning or a serious warning depending on the situation. According to the first item of the third item, those who violate national laws and constitute criminal offenses, those who violate relevant public security management regulations will be punished, and those with serious circumstances will be advised to drop out of school." Fu Yuanjua looked expressionlessly at the silence and spat out, too, the sunlight shining brightly behind him. At this moment, Cheng-Mo turned his head and glanced at Sun Pengzi sitting in the middle, 2 seats away from him, who was watching a play. He said, "To be honest, you're not cool at all. Although everyone is watching you, they are watching your jokes because someone is using you as a gun." After Cheng-Ma finished speaking, the whole classroom fell silent. Everyone in the class knew who Cheng-Ma was referring to as the gunman. Except for Sun Daong, no one dared to do so. At this moment, Sun Daong was also looking at this side. Upon hearing what Cheng-Mo had said, his chubby face, which had originally been smiling, froze. He didn't expect Cheng-Mo to endure for so long before finally revealing himself, which was completely different from what he had expected. Fu Yuanzhua looked at Cheng-Ma's calm face and said playful words in a tone. He didn't utter the word 3 for a long time. He stared into Cheng-Ma's eyes, and there was a resin lens between the two, with a faint reflection of Fu Yuanzhua on it. Fu Yuanzhua twitched the corners of his mouth and seemed to be mocking Cheng-Mo's cleverness. He quickly reached out and picked up the textbook from Cheng-Mo's desk, posing as a baseball thrower. He immediately turned around and threw it at Sun Daong, who was looking over here. He raised his voice and cursed, "Sun Daong, you chubby guy, bring a brand new set of seats and desks over to the school affairs office. I won't sit on someone else's seat." Sun Daong was caught off guard and almost got hit by a book on his chubby face. He was a bit angry at first, but when he thought it was Fu Yuanzhua, he immediately calmed down. Even he didn't dare to provoke Fu Yuanzhua too much, so Sun Daong rubbed the math textbook that fell on him twice and forced a hee-hee smile, saying, "I said Fu Yuanzhua, what makes you so angry about this small matter? Isn't it just a desk and chair? Let's move a set with you." Fu Yuanzhua looked at Sun Daong's greasy face with a smile on his face and said with a hee-hee smile, "I'll give you 10 minutes. If I don't have space to sit for 10 minutes, I'll beat you into a pig's head." A burst of laughter erupted in the class. This made Sun Daong blush and grit his teeth as he said to Mo Shigan sitting behind him, "Dr. Ma, you, the monkey, and the big bear go to the academic affairs office to bring a brand new set of tables and chairs for Fu Yuanzhua." Fu Yuanzhua said coldly, "Don't forget the kind of class that my brother wants. 1. The desks and chairs in the class are ergonomic and different from those in other classes." Sun Daong took out his student ID from his belt and handed it to Dr. Ma Shiganma, who had already stood up, saying, "Brush my study spots." Dr. Ma hesitated for a moment and said, "This." Sun Daong said fiercely to Cheng-Mo, who was sitting motionless in Fu Yuanzhua's seat, "MD, I will make that 4-eyed chicken vomit twice as much for me." When Dr. Mo Shigan's tall and strong figure appeared at the back door of the classroom, it was not long before the bell rang for the first class. Obviously, they took Fu Yuanzhua's 10-minute words very seriously. Dr. Ma held a chair, gasping for breath, and walked towards the window, saying to Fu Yuanzhua, "The table is coming soon." Fu Yuanzhua didn't speak, just nodded as he looked at Dr. Ma. Dr. Ma, panting heavily, moved the chair with a cushion and adjustable back to Fu Yuanzhua's side and asked, "Zhua, where are you going to sit?" Then he glanced at Cheng-Mo, who was still working on the exam paper, and said, "Do you want to push this kid aside and replace your desk and chair?" Fu Yuanzhua lowered his head with great interest and turned a deaf ear to everything. Cheng-Mo, who was focused on the exam, said, "No need, I'll just sit behind him." At this moment, the monkey and the big bear also carried their desks into the classroom. Dr. Ma forced a smile and felt that he should not hesitate to wake up the boy who was pretending to be B. However, at this moment, Fu Yuanzhua had already spoken, so it was not convenient to speak. He could only disappointedly put the chair behind Cheng-Mo and instructed the big bear and monkey to set the table for Fu Yuanzhua. Finally, he even used a tissue to wipe the table and chairs for Fu Yuanzhua before walking back to his seat. In this way, Cheng-Ma once again became the second-to-last seat by the window, just like his position in Class 1, and Fu Yuanzhua was still the last one on this seat. After Sun Dayong's dog-legged trio arranged the tables and chairs, Fu Yuanjue tried to sit on the cushioned seat, lifted the PI stock and bounced it twice, showing a satisfied smile and saying, "Not bad. Not bad. It should have been replaced long ago." Then he crossed his legs and waved his hand to Sun Daong sitting in the middle with a smile on his face, saying, "Daong, thank you." It was as if he had just scolded someone as a chubby guy, and said that he was looking for teeth all over the ground to hit him. Sun Daong turned his head to greet Fu Yuanjue, his face twitched with fat, and he forced a smile and said, "You're welcome, someone will pay the price anyway." He even glanced at Cheng Yimou sitting in front of Fu Yuanjue. However, Cheng Yimou didn't pick him up at all. He flew his pen in his seat and finally finished the first 2 pages of the exam paper before ringing the class bell. After ringing the class bell, the homeroom teacher of class 9 stepped on the bell and walked into the classroom. The originally slightly noisy class suddenly quieted down, even Sun Daong, who had just spoken loudly to Dr. Ma, closed his mouth. At the moment the bell rang, Chen Ma looked up and saw the woman walking into the classroom with a lesson plan in her hand. She was 1.7 meters tall, her hair slightly permed, her eyes narrow and long, her nose high and straight, and her skin was as thick as condensed fat. She was wearing a light gray loose sweater paired with black wide-leg pants, which was both stylish and elegant. She looked like a tall, round, and Matsumoto Ruoya, full of mature jade girl style. Compared to the female students who walked with wind and kicked people, it was really the difference between an ugly duckling and a white swan. At this moment, Cheng Yimou realized why Zhang Chao said in Phantom Shadow. The light of mountains, the sound of water, the color of the moon, the fragrance of flowers, the charm of literati, and the posture of beauties are all indescribable and unattainable. They are truly enough to capture soul dreams and reverse emotions. However, he only sighed for a moment, just like a person who doesn't like porcelain, suddenly seeing a beautiful piece of porcelain and realizing that porcelain can be so beautiful. He didn't want to spend money to keep this porcelain for himself, because for people like Cheng Yimou, money is obviously more important than porcelain. For those who have never been interested in campus gossip, Cheng Yimou naturally didn't know that the teacher in front of her was called Shen Yui, Shen Mingjie's cousin. Her father was not only a leader of the Education Bureau, but also a serious writer Shen Ping. Her grandfather was Shen Sigua, the former principal of Chanya. She only started teaching at Chanya Middle School last year. According to Chanya's tradition, new teachers are required to lead Class 9, so she is the homeroom teacher of Class 9. Shen Yui caused a sensation as soon as she entered Chanya. It wasn't long before she caused Chanya to fly around, because many college students from the neighboring university climbed over the wall to inquire about her information, and many even went to the classroom to peep. Shen Yui couldn't bear the disturbance, and the school had no choice but to install pointed iron railings on the wall and strengthen security checks at the front and back school gates, in order to effectively stop the harassment of bored college students. However, in terms of beauty, Chen Ma only looked up and then lowered his head, unlike other students who looked at Shen Yui on stage with burning eyes, regardless of gender. After all, everyone likes beautiful things. Shen Yui, who was tall and tall, walked up to the podium in her leather shoes and casually placed the lesson plan on the podium. She said in a gentle and peaceful voice, "Class." Then the sound of chairs colliding became loud, and a heartfelt "Hello teacher" echoed in the classroom of Class 9, Grade 1. Especially the boys shouted with extra effort. Cheng Yimou also stood up sickly, but remained silent. He listened to this perfunctory call and judged that this female teacher should be very popular and beloved. When all the students sat down, Shen Yui looked at the second boy sitting in the middle of the podium and said in surprise, "Ding Jia, shouldn't you go to the next class, Class 8? Why are you still sitting here?" Ding Jia, who was sitting below, pushed his glasses and said, "Anyway, he will still come back after the final exam next time. There's no need to go to Class 8, and get kicked back after finishing last. It's better for me to be the first in Class 9, than the Ox Queen." Besides, I still like listening to Teacher Shin's classes. Sun Daong interjected at this moment and said, "Are you afraid you don't like listening, you like watching?" Everyone laughed and the atmosphere in the classroom was very relaxed and joyful, which was vastly different from the serious, warlike atmosphere of Class 1. Shen Yui just smiled and called for everyone to be quiet. Her gaze searched the classroom for a while before seeing the thin and small Qingmo in the corner. It was obvious that Qingmo was sitting in that position, which was somewhat unexpected for her. She watched as Qingmo walked down the podium with a smile and walked into the corridor closest to the window, saying, "Today, a new student came to our class. Let's ask him to introduce himself." According to Chanya's unwritten rule, those who are promoted should introduce themselves, but teachers who are demoted generally do not ask them to introduce themselves. However, there has never been any personnel turnover in Class 9, and Shen Yui is a newcomer who doesn't know so much. In addition, she is very curious about this boy who is said to have shown his love to her proud cousin with a 0 score in 7 subjects. But in the eyes of those students who know the hidden rules of Chanya, it's like slapping their face. Suddenly, the eyes of the whole class were once again focused on Qingmo. Qingmo also felt a headache. He judged from Shen Yui's smiling face and her inquisitive gaze that the female teacher did not have any malice, so he could only stand up and say, "My name is Qingmo. Success in nothing, mo in obscurity." Shen Yui frowned as she watched the boy standing in the sunlight with a gloomy demeanor. Even his self-introduction was so negative that it was hard to imagine him as a genius who could score full marks in exams and essays. Originally, she had some expectations for this student who scored full marks every time. After all, as long as they were teachers, they always favored students with good grades. However, if they were a gloomy and heavy boy, it would be difficult to get close to and like them. Class 9 is full of students who don't love learning. Shen Yui still hopes that this former first grader can bring her some surprises and slightly change the atmosphere in the class. So she walks up to Qingmo, puts her hand on his desk, and smiles warmly at him, saying, "This self-introduction is not positive enough. Let's change it, Qingmo classmate." Qingmo looked up slightly at Shen Yui, who had been baptized by the sun and had a crystal-clear smile, and said, "Cheng Wang defeated the enemy, and Yan Mo cooked it first." Shen Yui restrained his smile and looked quietly at Qingmo, saying, "This is too cruel, change it." The students in the classroom looked at each other in confusion. They could understand the meaning of becoming a king and defeating a bandit, but everyone had heard of the obscure idiom, "Wild goose silently cooks first," for the first time. Some people took out their phones and tried to search on Baidu, but didn't know how to type the 4 characters. As a Chinese language teacher, Shen Yui naturally knows that Yan Mo cooks first comes from Shan Mu in Volume 7 of Zhuangzi Ji Shi. The original meaning of the original text is: Zhuangzi went to a friend's house as a guest, and the friend was preparing to kill geese to cook. There were 2 geese in the house, and the child servant asked the master which one to kill, and the master replied that killing would not make a sound. The later derived idiom, Yan Mo cooks first, is a metaphor for those without talent being eliminated first, which is somewhat similar to the meaning of becoming a king and defeating the enemy. Being able to connect these 2 idioms and introduce one's own name in a short period of time can be said to be very clever. However, in Shen Yui's opinion, this answer still does not meet her expectations, is not fair and peaceful enough, and lacks a gentleman's demeanor. Therefore, he once again spoke up and called Qingmo Huan. Although Qingmo has cognitive impairment and his associative ability has been affected, this level of difficulty should not make him difficult. However, he is not used to Shen Yui's caring gaze and lowers his head, saying helplessly, "If you don't donate, you will succeed. Remember silently, and you will grow old." When Qingmo said, "If you don't donate, you will succeed. Remember it silently, and grow old." Almost all the students in the classroom felt the same way, truly worthy of being a student of Class 1 and a strange genius who has scored full marks in multiple exams. "I can't understand what you're saying." Shen Yui smiled slightly, like a daisy blooming in the warm breeze, fresh and elegant. She nodded to Qingma and gestured for him to sit down. She was quite satisfied with these 2 sentences spoken by Qingmo, so she stopped asking him to change words. She turned around and walked towards the blackboard, saying as she walked, "You may think that Qingmo was just using some very rare idioms, but is it really that simple?" With these words, Shen Yui walked up to the podium and wrote 8 words on the blackboard. "If you don't donate, you will succeed." The beautiful regular script was like a flat visual art, with a strong charm and beauty, truly like a person's character. Shen Yui turned around and asked, "Does anyone know what these 8 words mean?" 9. Ding Jia, the top student in the class all year round, had already lowered his head and looked it up in an electronic dictionary. He quickly raised his hand before anyone else could find out. Shen Yui ordered Ding Jia to get up and answer. Ding Jia checked and felt that what Qingmo said was not really remarkable, so he said in a grandiose tone, "Merit is not worth donating is a Buddhist language, which means that all the merits and efforts in the world will not be in vain and will inevitably be rewarded." That Jade Ru is successful refers to the fact that adversity can help a person achieve success. In Ding Jia's memory, he is quite good. He copied Baidu Baiki accurately without any mistakes, so there is still an expression on his face that is just like this. The underlying line is, "What if he can read?" It's the internet age now, just know how to use search engines. Shen Yui smiled and gestured for Ding Jia to sit down, then said, "Ding Jia is very standard, but his understanding is very simple. He is far from comparable to Qingmo's extensive knowledge." Shen Yui praised the completion of silence, and the entire classroom fell silent, but their expressions varied. Some were disdainful, some were curious, some were indifferent, some were sneered at, especially Ding Jia, who was quite dissatisfied. Clearly, search engines said so. Shen Yui took a panoramic view of everything. At this moment, she felt as if Qingmo could really become a catfish in class 9. She smiled and decided to continue praising Qingmo fiercely. So Shen Yui closed the lesson plan and glanced at Qingmo, saying, "Qingmo not only has a very large reading volume, but also has a very profound understanding of these words and phrases. He can afford the saying that learning is rich and 5 chariots are rich." Let's first take a look at this sentence. If you don't contribute, you will succeed. This is a very proud sentence, just as Ding Jia said at the beginning, hard work won't be in vain. All difficulties will polish you and make you a piece of jade. Shen Yui then extended these 2 terms to explain the origin and meaning of meritorious but not tang donating in Buddhist language, followed by the origin and allusion of yu ru yu cheng, with a focus on Zhang Zai's expression of the idea of harmony between people and things, in Ximing. He regarded the universe as a big family, explained personal moral obligations, and promoted the idea of survival, I follow things, no, I would rather be, and the idea of being happy and obedient to fate. At this point, all students believe that the meaning of all of this is not something that readers can easily understand. These 2 words just mean they can be inherited. I don't see how profound Qingma's knowledge is. It's not as exaggerated as Teacher Shen said. Shen Yui seemed to know the thoughts of his classmates in the audience, showing a mysterious smile and writing on the blackboard, "Memorize it subconsciously, years go by." Then he turned around and said, "This sentence comes from the poem De Bin Shi written by Ban Gu in the Eastern Han Dynasty. If you only look at the literal expression of this sentence, which means to study with perseverance and dedication, you cannot fully understand the meaning of Qingmo. However, by referring to the entire text of De Bin Shi, you can see that this sentence expresses the same lineage as the previous sentence. If you don't contribute to the Tang dynasty, you will achieve success. Shen Yui became more and more popular as she spoke, and even stopped attending classes. After all, there were not many people listening in class. She began to deeply analyze the meaning of Qingmo's 2 words. Shen Yui walked down from the podium and said in a rhythmic voice, "The poem, De Bin Shi, is written in the form of a question and answer, expressing the author Ban Gu's own frustration and emotion. It also refutes his inappropriate thoughts and depression from a positive perspective, encouraging himself to remain determined and strive tirelessly according to established goals. We are connected to the whole sentence of, merit is not Tang's donation, Yu Ru is successful. From the perspective of subconscious memorization and years, it forms a complete meaning, because Zhang Zai's, establishing a heart for heaven and earth, establishing a destiny for the people, inheriting the ultimate knowledge of the sages, and opening up peace for the world. The ideology and attitude of Li De are exactly the ultimate proposition that Ban Gu wants to discuss in De Bin Shi, whether it is to establish virtue or to establish speech. Merit is not worth donating, is also in line with Zhang Zai's argument of following the fate, and De Bin Shi, it is about exploring the meaning of Confucian rational life, humanistic life, and moral life, as well as the relationship between meritorious service and moral education. Although there are only 16 words in the world, it contains a huge amount of information, especially for Zhang Zai and Ban Gu, who grew up in adversity and lost their talents, ultimately becoming a typical generation of great masters. Therefore, these two sentences may seem unrelated, but in reality, they are interconnected and have a profound meaning. There is no culture that cannot be understood. Shen Yui stood on the podium chatting confidently, while the students below looked bewildered and their expressions were all, can this kind of operation still be possible? Sleeping trough, can 16 words still express so many meanings? Teacher Shen, are you overthinking? Many students were still peeking at Cheng Yimo sitting by the back window, only to find that he didn't even listen to the praise Shen Yui sang to him. He only occasionally looked up and pretended to listen. In fact, his left hand was hanging down and his right hand was sitting on the desk doing the exam, without listening to what Shen Yui was saying on stage before the end of class. Shen Yui smiled and said, "So when using idioms, everyone must accurately understand the meaning of each word and know the allusion of this idiom, otherwise they will make jokes when encountering cultured people. For example, what Ding Jiaye said earlier, it's better to be the head of a chicken than the back of a cow." This sentence comes from Han Sui of the Warring State Strategy, and the original text is "it's better to be the mouth of a chicken than the back of a cow." Ding Jiaye's classmate used this sentence correctly in his context, and we won't discuss whether this mentality is positive or not. However, if you understand the literal meaning of this sentence, you will find it very vulgar and appear ignorant, because the back of a cow refers to the steel door of a cow. As soon as the word steel door was spoken, the whole class burst into laughter. Among them, Sun Daong was the most exaggerated, lying on his stomach and hammering the table with his hand. He never liked Ding Jiaye, who was a bit smelly, and he loved to show off in front of Teacher Shen the most. Ding Jiaye, who was sitting in front, also blushed with laughter and his head drooped. At this moment, the class bell rang, and Shen Yui put away the lesson plan and smiled, saying, "If it were changed to not for the phoenix tail, it would be much better. I hope everyone can learn more from Cheng Yimo to finish class." Before leaving the classroom, Shen Yui turned his head to look at Cheng Yimo sitting in the corner, expressionless and practicing questions. The sunlight made him even more gloomy, quiet like a stone Buddha covered in moss in the rain. But at this moment, she felt that the boy was not as annoying as her cousin said, but rather had some meaning. Note 1. Exquisite egoists. First of all, understand the neutral term egoism. Egoism is not equivalent to selfishness, but is self-centered, with personal interests as the principle of thought and behavior, and moral evaluation standards. Ordinary egoists are instinctively driven, naturally seeking external or internal rewards, and their behavior is understandable. Exquisite egoists refer to those who have been carefully dressed or even disguised as egoists. These individuals generally have high education, intelligence, and moral flaws. Only such individuals are more likely to take advantage of loopholes in laws and rules to obtain improper benefits. These improper benefits may be economic benefits, your right to control your own body, your right to speak freely, or the right to be free from fear, among others. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Fly Catcher Bottle, 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Fly Catcher Bottle, 2. The following 3 classes were lackluster, and Cheng Yimou did not listen. Listening was meaningless to him. He had already mastered almost all the knowledge in high school. If he had no cognitive impairment now, asking him to take the college entrance examination would have given him some confidence in the exam. Moreover, his current problem is not related to his studies. So, for Qinghua at this moment, the only thing he has to overcome is himself. During the break time and after class exercises, Sun Daong didn't bother him either, but Qinghua knew he would definitely come. As expected, when he was released from high school, Sun Daong and his 3 henchmen, Dr. Ma, Big Bear, and Monkey, surrounded him directly, blocking Qinghua and preventing him from leaving his seat. At this moment, all the students were quickly leaving the class. Those who went to the cafeteria went to the cafeteria, and those who went to the off-campus snack shop went to the off-campus snack shop. No one turned around to take a second look. Only Fu Yuanjue, who was sitting behind Cheng Yimou, looked at Sun Daong, who was eager to try. He lazily stood up and warned, "Sun Fatty, don't damage my new desk and chairs. If you do, I will go crazy." Sun Daong's momentum, which had just been lifted, broke through his martial arts skills in an instant. He turned his head to look at Fu Yuanjue, and the fat on his face shook slightly, saying, "Fu Yuanjue, I'm just welcoming new classmates. Do you also want a BB? You have to figure it out. I'm letting you down, not really afraid of you." Fu Yuanjue put his hands in his pants and walked towards the back door without looking back, saying, "I don't care if you make me feel scared or not, as long as my desks and chairs are not dirty or messy when I come back." Sun Da gritted his teeth with courage and watched as Fu Yuanjue walked out of the classroom. He turned his head and smiled at Qinghua sitting in his seat, saying, "I have achieved nothing. As an unknown student, Qinghua, I also have some learning problems to ask you for advice. Could you please come with me to the stairwell and say a few words?" Cheng Yimou glanced at the 4 tall and powerful people surrounding him on 3 sides. Not to mention 4, even if it was only Sun Daong, he couldn't resist. His weak body made him helpless in the face of violence, unable to escape, but Qinghua was not afraid. He looked around half a circle of the 4 people surrounding him and said calmly, "If there's anything, just say it here. I won't go to places like stairwells without surveillance." Sun Daong slapped Cheng Mo's desk and made a loud noise in the empty classroom, then sneered, "Don't go. Do you think there's surveillance here, so I dare not play with you?" After finishing, Sun Daong said to the tall and thin person beside him, "Monkey." The monkey immediately left and went to the desk to find the transparent glue and a page of white paper. He ran to the front of the classroom under the surveillance camera and skillfully moved the nearest desk over. He then stood on top of it and used his toes to stick the transparent glue onto the surveillance camera. The thin white paper covered the surveillance camera. Cheng Yimou looked at everything coldly and said to Sun Daong with a calm expression, "I advise you not to use violence." Persuasion. What advice do you use? School rules and regulations. Sun Daong turned his head and looked around at the dog legs beside him, showing a very funny expression. Dr. Ma and Big Bear also laughed. Then Sun Daong lowered his head and looked at Cheng Yimou, mocking him, "You memorize it. If you memorize it from beginning to end, not a word is bad. We won't trouble you today. Even if we don't follow the school rules, we can be reasonable. This matter was originally initiated by you. I didn't provoke you on my own, and after being deceived by you, I didn't say anything outrageous. If you think that the 1,000 learning points spent on Fu Yuanjue should be counted on me, it's really inappropriate. It's obvious that Fu Yuanjue didn't like you and deliberately did that. You should have caused him trouble, right? What's the point of finding someone like me who is small and transparent? I don't have much sense of achievement, Faced with the opponent's aggression, Qingma took a rational attitude to analyze and attempted to divert the tide of trouble to the east. The four people around Qingmo were said to be a bit awkward. Dr. Ma turned to look at Sun Daong and said, "Daong, it seems like what you said makes some sense." After hesitating for a moment, Sun Daong interrupted Dr. Ma's words and said, "You make sense." Sun Daong then looked at Qingmo and said, "Do you know who you offended?" Qingmo instantly understood that it was not for no reason for the other party to trouble him. Sun Daong and the others should be friends of Tian Bin, and this time they were probably doomed. He could only say, "Did Tian Bin ask you to come? He didn't tell you that I am weak and prone to accidents." Regarding this point, Tian Bin had told Sun Daong that Qingmo was anemic and mainly used intimidation. So Sun Daong smiled coldly and said, "What kind of JB disease is anemia? I'll tell you now, my blood sugar is too high and I don't have enough calcium, so I'm very irritable." After speaking, Sun Daong pulled up Qingmo's backpack with a grim expression, lifted it up, and poured all the books onto Qingmo's head. The book fell off Qingmo's head with a clatter, disrupting his already messy hairstyle. Qingmo was speechless. If it were just such bullying, it would actually be okay, but he knew he couldn't show indifference, so he pretended to be very aggrieved. Of course, in his heart, he felt that Sun Daong's humiliations were too childish. Sun Daong looked at Qingmo, who seemed a bit timid, and sneered. He gave a glance to Dr. Ma beside him, but he hesitated for a moment before whispering to Sun Daong, "Will playing here mess up Brother Zhua's tables and chairs?" Sun Daong slapped Dr. Ma's head and said, "Brother Zhua, you're a gem. You're so afraid of Fu Yuanzhua because you're 205. You don't know how to straighten it out for him later." Dr. Ma exclaimed, "Oh," with a somewhat aggrieved expression, and immediately pushed it to silence. "Stinky kid, you're quite worried, aren't you? You just memorized the school rules. You're starting from the first one with me now." Qingmo didn't respond. Seeing that Qingmo was silent, Sun Daong slapped Dr. Ma's head again and said, "Didn't you say that this kid's health is not good? You take care of him a bit, how can you just push him?" Dr. Ma was a bit annoyed when Sun Daong patted him, so he picked up a physics textbook that had fallen on the table and patted Qingmo's head. "I told you not to pretend. Don't pretend, why don't you listen?" Qingmo didn't know if this was what Dr. Ma wanted to say to Sun Daong. He only knew that silence was of no use to these bear kids and could only helplessly say, "What do you want?" Sun Daong was also watching Qingmo's reaction. To be honest, he didn't actually do much of fighting, and he usually called it fierce. A few people looked down on this and bullied that, and even called him to fight. He was also quite hesitant. At this moment, seeing Qingmo finally speak up, he breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, but in a domineering tone, he said to Qingmo, "Since you also know why I came to see you, I'll explain. Tian Bin didn't want you to compensate for 7,000 learning points, plus 1,000 learning points here. I'll give you 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, you must give me 8,000 learning points. That's all for this matter." Qingmo naturally couldn't be willing to give Sun Daong 8,000 yuan to learn, which is almost equivalent to over 7,000 yuan. So he shook his head and said, "I don't have money." Seeing Qingmo's refusal so straightforward that there was no chance to bargain, Sun Daong shouted, "Shit!" He jumped off the table next to Qingmo and rushed to Qingmo, grabbing Qingmo's shirt collar. With a fierce threat, he said, "You are a foolish ex who has no background and cannot fight. You only know a few idioms and recite a few school rules. What are you pretending to be? Do you think I really dare not hit you?" At this moment, Qingmo suddenly felt that wisdom was useless in the face of absolute violence. Years of physical weakness made him resent his weak body, but at this moment, he didn't want to give in at all because Qingmo felt that when his heart weakened, it would continue to weaken, fall in the eyes of these people, fall in illness, fall on the ground, and fall lower than the ground. Qingmo felt that this world has never been gentle with anyone. Instead of cursing the darkness, it is better to light a torch. Just as his silent thoughts were drifting and his inner turmoil was stirring, his eardrums suddenly swelled with his own rapid heartbeat. The watch on his wrist was heating up like a soldering iron, and he felt like his whole body was burning hot, and his cells seemed to be boiling, about to burst out of his body. Sun Dayoung's originally fierce expression turned into shock. Damn it. Isn't it? I didn't even touch it before I fainted. MD, hurry up and send me to the school clinic. This is the last sentence that Qingma heard before losing consciousness. End of this chapter.